The Earl of Briarton was an artist in the Kingdom of Lancaster. The guy was considered the best and most popular. He was famous for his subtle and colorful artistic style. He was a young man with a short haircut, an amazing body, and strong hands, in which he held brushes like a pen. He constantly received many compliments, bathing in them. The guy became known as the Hand of God, or rather, that's what people called him. According to one girl, only those who didn't know him personally called him that. The Count stood in the shadows and listened to the girl when they were on the balcony. She was angrily telling him that not all of the artist's works belonged to him. As it turned out, some of the paintings were his wife's. The lady held a small picture of the Earl of Briarton's face in her hand. The boy said thoughtfully, "Interesting," and then fell silent, considering her interlocutor's statement. Afterwards, he continued to question. He did not understand why Countess Brainthor allowed her husband to have all the glory. The fair-haired girl pressed her hands to her chest, as if from the cold. She didn't know what to say. And the blonde guy continued his thought. He said that Elton was the most influential media company in the area. Its owner was the Duke of Sussex. The girl began asking to publish the real story of her husband. She imagined a newspaper with this story. And almost crying, she began to say that she wanted to return to her normal life. The girl began to remember how he proposed to her in her youth. At that moment, she lost her parents. Then she was the only heir. It was a great pain for her. She recalled that later all her pain was healed by Ryan. He promised that he would always be by her side, and the lady decided to tie the future with him. The girl thought then that it was necessary to let go of the past. While they were having a moment of happiness, a group of people were standing nearby. They were discussing whether the second son was ready. One man said that he was currently having difficulties with inheritance and receiving a title. They lived together later. The girl remembers how her husband, while drinking, discussed the point of being a count. He said that every man should somehow find a way to become famous. The Countess said that she wanted to fulfill all his wishes. The guy constantly asked what he had done that God did not love him so much. The girl began to paint pictures herself. She had to write her husband's name on the pictures so that he would receive the coveted glory. She tried her best. The Countess did this so that her beloved would be happy. At one of the get-togethers with a friend, she asked how often the Count was at home, to which she answered that not often, because according to him, he was constantly working in the workshop. And the girl sadly claimed that lately he always came back drunk. And after a pause, she added that once he even smelled of women's perfume. Naturally, Ryan denied everything. The girl was deep in thought. Then her friend suddenly declared with a bright and calm smile that it was partly the Countess's own fault. The girl listened to her friend with fear and anxiety. She asked again if Inessa thought the same. Her green eyes darted from side to side, because this was clearly not what she wanted to hear from her close friend. And she continued calmly and with a bright smile. She said that it was unfair that the Countess was not very attractive to men, because they do not like crazy people like her. The green-eyed girl tried to hold back her tears. She asked, breathing heavily, what she should have done next. And she said with a laugh that if she had been in the Countess's place, she would have simply left Ryan alone. Inessa did not understand what her friend was leading to and tried to ask a question. But her friend interrupted her. The friend assured that the Count loved freedom and that perhaps, if he was given this, their relationship could be saved. The Countess thought about it, looking down. And her friend covered her face with her hand and looked at Inessa with displeasure. At that moment, her smile disappeared from her face completely, and she angrily pressed her bright lips together. Inessa pursed her lips and was obviously training, thinking it all over. Suddenly, her friend took her hand with both of hers. She began to assure her with a kind note that she was saying all this only because she cared about her. The girl's eyes stopped darting, and she even relaxed somehow and squeezed out a small smile, agreeing with her friend. She stood up and thanked Charlotte for her care, adding that she appreciated it all. She remembered one night when she was sitting alone. The girl was worried about Ryan because 3 days had passed since he had not returned from the workshop, and she assured herself that he had a lot of work. Inessa was upset because that day was their wedding anniversary. Suddenly, a great idea came to her mind to come to him and surprise him by doing something nice. The girl was already walking through the workshop, carrying a basket with warm, fresh food and a bottle of wine. She wondered to herself how surprised her husband would be. Inisa specified that she loved her husband with all her soul because he was her childhood friend. In her opinion, this was enough for love. She recalled how she was already approaching the door, behind which was the Count. Then she began to open the door. In the room, there were quiet moans of her friend and her husband. Charlotte asked the Count with whom he would stay if Inessa found out everything. He answered that he would stay with Charlotte. The guy held the girl in his arms, their moans spreading throughout the room. In a fit of passion, he uttered words of love to Charlotte. Inisa stood and watched what was happening through the half-open door. In shock, she dropped the basket. As a result, all the food flew out and the bottle of wine was smashed to pieces. Afterwards, she went into the room, covering her mouth with her hand. Charlotte sat on the table, their games interrupted. The lovers looked at the Countess. Inisa could only ask what all this meant. The Countess remembered that after that incident in the workshop, Ryan completely changed his attitude towards her. He tried to convince her. He only apologized, saying that he had made a mistake and that there was nothing serious. The Count insisted that men sometimes behaved like children. He promised to sort things out with Charlotte, and he stood in front of his wife, looked at her with a frightened look, and held her hands. He hugged the Countess sharply and tightly. Her eyes sparkled with surprise. The Count assured her that she was his only one. She burst into tears and could not refuse him. With tears, she hugged him and assured him that she still loved him. The girl continued to paint pictures from her husband's point of view. She asked herself if it was all strange, and she assumed that maybe Ryan had cheated on her because she wasn't good enough. Inisa thought that if she tried harder, he could become famous and come back to her. She worked so hard on the paintings that she got dirty herself, and yet one day her hopes came true. She was painting a picture when she suddenly felt her husband's hand on her shoulder. He unexpectedly praised her for her hard work. Her smile brightened and tears came to her eyes. She cried out his name in happiness. He smiled too and continued to praise her. Then he paused. Ryan asked the girl if it was time for them to get a divorce. She fell silent and looked at her husband in bewilderment for a while. He took her hand and began to squeeze it lightly. Her eyes seemed to have turned gray. She continued to look silently at her husband, and he mockingly declared that Inisa was no longer the Countess of Briarton, calling her a psychopath. The girl broke out in a cold sweat. She asked again in fear, still not understanding anything. Pressed into the chair, she looked up with her mouth open. He held a document in his hands and said that they would come for her soon. Ryan added that this was their last meeting. She jumped up from her chair. Her husband repeated mockingly that Inez was the former Countess of Briarton. Without thinking, she ran out of the castle in fear. She knew she had to run away. The girl ran through the narrow streets. She didn't want to let them take her. Crying, Inisa ran along the sunbeam, asking herself questions about how this could have happened. A carriage was driving around the corner at high speed. The girl stopped, looking at the horse in shock. People started screaming that the carriage had hit someone. The girl was lying in her own blood and barely breathing. People started running up to her, trying to help. Someone started screaming for a stretcher to be brought. Inisa did not react to anyone and only looked at the sky, breathing slowly. She said to herself that she had dedicated her life to her husband. She had given him her title and glory, as well as her life. Having finished her recollection, the girl declares that she would like to get back everything that belonged to her. The Countess's husband called her a psychopath, and her friends said that she should be taken care of. The girl woke up into her bed, sweating. The servant woke her up. Inisa immediately got up from the bed. The servant said in fear that she was worried about the lady. The servant asked the lady again if everything was fine with her. Inisa looked at Mary in bewilderment. Our heroine clutched the blanket in her hand, breathing heavily. She looked around the room without understanding anything. The girl took hold of her face and asked herself what had happened to her. Mary began to calm the lady and reminded her that today was an important day. The Countess asked again what day it was. The servant said with a smile that today was Inisa's wedding anniversary. The green-eyed girl began to stare at one point, not understanding what was happening to her. The girl shouted to ask what date it was today. Mary stood there in bewilderment and was slightly frightened by the lady's abruptness. The maid stammered that today was the 28th of May, 1825. Inisa sat on the bed in complete shock, clutching her head. The girl realized that today was exactly 3 years since she found out that her husband was cheating on her. She broke out in a sweat again and grabbed her hair. She realized that she was back on the worst wedding anniversary of her life. The Countess quickly changed her clothes and began to walk around the castle, thinking about her actions. Mary followed and tried to calm her worried mistress. But Inesa completely ignored all the servants' words. Together, they reached the dining room. The lady asked why there was so much food on the tables. At first, Mary looked puzzled, and then explained that it was a celebratory dinner in honor of the wedding anniversary. The girl wrung her hands and lowered her head. Then she asked the servant to leave her alone for a while. The servant herself began to get nervous. Mary insisted that the mistress was unwell. Inisa, on the contrary, insisted that everything was fine with her. She turned to the maid and asked again to leave her alone. The servant reluctantly agreed and left, closing the door behind her. The girl lowered her hands and looked ahead, remembering everything. Inisa remembered the food and wine. She recognized the flowers she had chosen to decorate the table. The girl said that it was all for Ryan's happiness. She raised her hand and knocked the flowers and the vase to the floor, breaking it. She remembered her husband with anger. The girl grabbed the tablecloth and pulled its edge. As a result, all the cutlery and food flew in different directions, and the dishes broke. Inesa remembered and cried. She realized that her husband had never loved her. The girl blamed herself for being stupid, and that her love was pathetic. She told herself that her friendship with Charlotte was pointless. The Countess fell to her knees, not letting go of the tablecloth. She felt ashamed of how naive she had been. The girl tried to calm down somehow. Inesa sat down in a chair. She began to remember the past. No one had seen Ryan that day. The girl concluded that her husband had been on a date with her friend. Standing up, she told herself that she needed to pull herself together. Inesa realized that now she needed to start working. To begin with, she decided to get back everything that Ryan had taken from her. The girl reasons that the best way to do this was a divorce. But for a divorce between aristocrats, according to the laws of the kingdom, weighty reasons were needed. This was a bigger problem for society. The man was always the main one, and the girl should only look after the house. Inesa reasons that their kingdom was the most conservative. Social status did not allow women to divorce. The only option was to make a fuss and convince the king to understand her situation. The girl suddenly realized what a scandal she could cause. Taking one of her paintings, she decided that her husband's entire reputation was only the result of creating and exhibiting paintings in his name. She told herself that if she told everyone that the paintings weren't his, it would ruin his entire reputation. And she knew that it was easy to prove, because Ryan's abilities were ordinary. Her thoughts were interrupted by one of the servants. He opened the door slightly and, apologizing, said that he had brought a fresh newspaper. The girl immediately took the newspaper but continued to think. While reading the newspaper, she began to remember. Elton was the most influential newspaper in the kingdom. Her husband published his paintings there, and through it, he became so popular. Clenching her fists tightly, Inesa thought about how she could expose Ryan through this newspaper. A crash and noise interrupted everything. The servants and the mistress turned their heads towards the door to see who had come. It turned out to be her drunken husband. Ryan was angry that he returned, and his wife did not deign to come out to meet him. He said that it was a disgrace for the girl. Inesa bit her lips and looked at her husband with fear. He walked up to his wife and snatched the newspaper from her hands. Ryan began to read it and laughingly asked what she was looking for there. The husband asked if she was looking for gossip, and he said that all women were alike. The guy took off his jacket and gave it to his wife. He said it was a pity, repeating that it was expected from a woman. Inesa looked down sadly. The girl clenched her fists. She boldly asked if he had said everything. The guy looked at his wife in slight shock. He was clutching the newspaper tightly out of anger. Inesa looked him straight in the eye with confidence. She asked him questions that he would most likely ask her. Her husband pursed his lips and remained silent, and sweat appeared on his face. Inesa continued asking questions. She was interested in time and their similarity. The drunken husband, not understanding anything, continued to look at her angrily. The Countess accused him of not visiting her even once during her illness. Ryan began to shout and make excuses. He said that he had a lot of work then, and that was why he could not come to her then. In a calm and cold voice, the girl replied that she did not understand what he was talking about. Afterwards, she smiled sweetly at him and wanted to know what important business her husband had at that time. Having calmed down, Ryan began to tell about the New Year's ball. As it turned out, it would be held in the royal palace. This interested the girl. The festival was held every year. It was organized by the royal family in honor of the New Year. Ryan noted that it was a great opportunity to make a good impression on the royal family. From what he said, everyone was eager to get in. The husband also said that this celebration would be different from the previous one. The Duke of Sussex himself was supposed to be at the ball. The girl's eyes lit up with interest, and she herself pronounced his last name. That tall blonde guy was King Edward's younger brother. Before he took the throne, the boy was the king's right hand. Enisa's husband said that Sussex owned Elton. Ryan noted that the publication supported talented people and that they all achieved great heights. The Count waved his arms and smiled slyly. He said that this was a chance for the Countess to become the best artist in their country. Coming closer, the brunette put his hand on the girl's shoulder. He ordered Inez to get ready and make herself look proper. The girl recalled this past. Her husband had always perceived her as a servant. She was simply a means to achieve his ambitions. Inisa insisted that everything would be different now. The girl clenched her fist near her chest. After that conversation, the husband went somewhere, and the girl sat and thought. Mary's servant noticed this and worried about her mistress's health. The old servant remembered that the lady had always been busy with something in order to please Ryan. But now the servant did not understand what was happening to her. Mary was wondering how she could help the Countess. The door opened, and another of Mary's servants came in. She told her that Baron Jason's lady had arrived. The old servant was immediately delighted, because she thought that this would raise her mistress's spirits. She immediately informed her mistress of the guest's arrival. The girl immediately turned to the servant. Her face was not very happy, which alarmed and surprised the servant. Inisa asked if there was an appointment with Lady Barona. The servant, confused, replied that she had come uninvited. Our heroine reminded herself that Charlotte always had her own way, and now things were no better. And she began to remember how her friend always looked down on her. But Charlotte didn't want to wait for an invitation. She burst into the office herself. Right from the doorway, she said that she had heard that Inesa had fallen ill. The guest thrust her outer garment at the servant. Charlotte asked again why, if Inesa was ill, she looked so cheerful. But she did not wait for answers, and immediately began to talk about the ball. With a smile, she asked if the Countess was also going to the ball. Charlotte's tone changed. She casually said that she had no carriage to go with. The girl smiled slyly and asked if she could take the Countess's carriage. The servants looked at the two girls and were very worried. Mary reasoned to herself that Charlotte could not ride in the marital carriage despite any relationship with the family members. The guest approached the Countess. Charlotte took her hand and squeezed it lightly. Inesa looked up, her mind wondering about Charlotte and Ryan's plan, before sending her to the hospital. The Countess asked the guest to let her go. Inesa took her hand back, and Charlotte was clearly in shock. The blue-eyed girl bit her lip and was confused. She asked again what the matter was. Inesa told her not to touch her so casually, and asked if she knew about decency. The Countess turned away from her guest. She asked to be left alone, saying that she was unwell. Charlotte began to feel angry at this attitude towards her, but she tried not to show it. The girl remembered the moment when her husband gave her a document from the doctor. She also remembered her husband's betrayal with her friend. She said goodbye and told herself that now there was a new Inesa in front of them. The Countess left the room and closed the door behind her. She stood in the corridor and tried to let her old friend go. Having calmed down a little and come to her senses, the Countess walked further down the corridor. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, King Edward was filling out important paperwork. He looked up and remarked that he was glad his brother would be coming to the ball. The Duke of Sussex stood silently, completely serious. The king was very embarrassed, looking at him. Afterwards, Edward suggested that the Duke relax. He asked if his brother was pleased that the king had made him go to the ball. The tall blonde man asked why this was necessary and what His Majesty was thinking about. The king was fiddling with his fingers. He noted that this was a great chance for the Duke to meet his young wife. Sussex thought to himself, what a scoundrel the king was. The Duke said he would only come for the opening of the ball and would leave immediately afterwards. The king said he would have to dress nicely, that was his order. Edward continued to insist that the Duke's lady love could have been at the ball. Sussex did not answer and silently left the king's room. But he still thought about Edward's words, although after that he only laughed at it. Evening had fallen over the estate. The carriage had already been brought to the exit of the castle. The crew was ready to leave at any moment. Ryan stood in a smart suit and waited for his wife. He was thinking about something and hugged himself slightly. Upon seeing Inisa, the brunette immediately expressed his displeasure. The guy irritably asked why she was getting ready for so long. The countess approached her husband in a very beautiful and chic dress. The girl was surprisingly calm and did not react to her husband's anger. Ryan stood there dumbfounded. Instead of a multitude of compliments, he immediately accused her of being crazy, and the girl just smiled openly and calmly at him. She noted that everyone at the ball would be dressed splendidly. The husband did not listen to her and declared that the countess had decided to disgrace him in public. The countess approached Ryan. She took her husband by the tie and squeezed it slightly. Smiling, she noted that it would be more shameful for him if she came in rags. Having let go of her husband's tie, the girl calmly walked further towards the carriage, waiting for them. On the way, Inisa fixed her hair and noticed earrings. The girl remembered that her mother had given them to her. She also imagined that if she hadn't returned, Charlotte would probably have worn them. The green-eyed girl assured herself that she would rewrite her own destiny as she wanted. The castle was already crowded, and everyone had already begun celebrating the new year. Inisa left her husband to greet her friends. The girl's dress was complimented, which clearly pleased the countess. She began to chat with Baroness Wickham about local news. Two deuces stood aside from the countess, discussing her. They did not understand why she was dressed like that. Speaking of Ryan, one of them noted that he neglected his wife, but they believed that this was just a rumor. Charlotte came up behind Inisa. The blue-eyed girl stood in shock and clutched the hem of her dress. Inisa immediately recognized her former friend. Charlotte, however, with obvious concern and mockery, asked about the countess's monochromatic style. The green-eyed girl smiled calmly. She noted that she liked this outfit more. The countess also said that she had already received many compliments today. Inisa said that if she had dressed at her friend's discretion, she would not have heard any compliments, and she added that her style was better. Charlotte was taken aback by the impudence, but did not have time to say anything. Inisa's husband appeared. He clenched his fists and wanted to tell his wife off for her rudeness. The brunette immediately shouted at her, "Ostishinor," asking why she was talking to Lady Jason like that. Ryan pointed out that they were best friends after all. The rest of the people in the room looked at all this with embarrassment. The Earl thought that his wife had decided to quarrel with Charlotte in public. The brunette smiled slyly. He decided that this was a great chance to calm Inisa down. The Duke of Sussex came up to them from behind. The blonde said that he had come at the wrong time. Everyone immediately turned around in shock at his voice. The guy said that Count Briantron's paintings were very good. He also said that he came here to personally get to know Rayon. The blonde calmly asked that no matter how emotional the Count was, he shouldn't have raised his voice in such places, and he immediately tried to apologize. The Duke did not listen to the apology to the end, but continued the thought. The blue-eyed guy aptly noted that the Count achieved success only after marriage. The blonde said that Inisa was always with Ryan and supported him. He smiled and noted that it was a great day. He also asked what these unnecessary and superfluous quarrels were for. The Duke turned around and left. The guy asked for forgiveness in front of everyone. He also wished everyone a good time. The Count was angry and clenched his teeth, and the Countess tried not to cry from happiness. For the first time, her efforts were appreciated by what she was happy about. At that time, the Duke was already standing on the balcony and thinking about the evening. He understood that he could not help but appear there, but those people enraged him. Suddenly, the blonde heard footsteps behind him and immediately turned around. His eyes sparkled. It was Countess Briorton. The girl bowed her head in respect and greeted him. The Duke left his hand on the railing. He wanted to know the reason why the green-eyed girl had come here. Inisa started with the main thing right away. She asked if Successius knew why her husband did not paint in front of other people. The guy was interested and continued listening. The blonde thought about the girl's words. He asked himself questions about the artist. The green-eyed girl paused for a moment to let the Duke think it over. She stated that her husband could not draw. Inisa reported that most of the paintings signed by the artist were not painted by him. People crowded around the stunning painting. They discussed how such masterpieces could be made by a novice in painting, the Earl of Briarton. The Duke of Sussex also stood admiring the work. One of the workers asked the blonde man if it was the first time he had seen the Earl's paintings. He replied that it was the first time, and then said that such beauty had truly enchanted him. The blonde reasoned that Ryan deserved to be called the hand of God as an artist. After those confessions, the guy was shocked. He couldn't believe that all of Ryan's paintings weren't from his brush. Having calmed down, the Duke asked again what exactly the Countess meant. The girl explained that her husband had achieved fame at the expense of another artist. She noted that Ryan was not a real artist. The blonde man looked at Inessa and considered her words. He reasoned that if her words were true, it could offend the Lancaster art world. The Duke looked into the girl's green eyes. He asked her to prove her words. Inessa quickly agreed to confirm their truthfulness. The girl approached the king's brother. She was holding a pencil and a piece of paper, which puzzled him greatly. Inessa leaned against the windowsill. She began to draw a picture on paper. The Duke noted to himself that the girl's movements were quite smooth, comparing them to water in a stream. The green-eyed girl was focused on her work. The blonde began to speculate that the Countess most likely hid her talents. Inessa quickly finished the drawing and handed it to the blue-eyed Duke of Sussex. As it turned out, the girl had drawn him. The blonde took the drawing, embarrassed. Inessa claimed that she herself was the one who carried out her husband's work. The blue-eyed guy ordered her to stop, and he said that the Countess did not need to explain anything more, assuring that he understood everything. Sussex reasoned that the Earl stole all the glory from his wife. The green-eyed girl barely held back the tears. The Duke said that this explained why Ryan had never been seen creating his paintings. The Countess agreed. She pointed out that this would have revealed her husband's secret. The blonde asked why the girl had decided to reveal everything now. The girl bit her lip and did not answer. She only noted that the Duke's reputation would not suffer. Inessa was fiddling with her hands behind her back. The girl bowed and asked to be informed of the decision of the owner of Elton. The Duke of Sussex smiled calmly. The guy said that the Countess should check the newspaper next week. He specified that his decision would be there. Inessa smiled happily, slightly embarrassed. Her eyes shone with happiness. The blonde man suddenly came up close to the Countess. He was holding a handkerchief in his hands. The Duke bowed his head to the girl and noticed that her hands were stained with graphite. The blue-eyed boy asked Inessa to wipe her hands. The green-eyed girl thanked the Duke and left. She entered the hall, where she was met by her already drunk husband. Ryan asked where she had been while the banquet was in full swing. The girl turned away from her husband. She apologized and said that she would like to return to the mansion earlier and rest there. Ryan was puzzled. Inessa pointed out that her husband could have stayed for the celebration, and she would have gone home alone. Her husband did not try to dissuade her, but on the contrary, he seemed to be even glad. He said that it was her choice, and the Countess could go calmly. The Duke stood at the window and thought about the Countess. The blonde reasoned that if she was right, then this was a betrayal of the empire by her husband. The guy noted that it was almost impossible for women and commoners to make a name for themselves. He argued that despite fame, it could not be abused. The Duke was once again admiring Inessa's abilities. His thoughts were interrupted by a servant. A gray-haired man announced that the Countess of Briarton had arrived. The blonde turned silently to the servant. He understood that if the girl's words were true, it would be a real sensation. A girl in a chic red dress walked into the room. She bowed and greeted. The Duke approached Inessa. He also greeted her and asked her how she was feeling. The Countess noted that thanks to the blonde, she was doing well. The two of them sat down at the table. The servant brought them hot tea. The Duke reasoned that it was difficult for an artist to hide his work process, but he also added that since Ryan's wife was the one doing the painting, that explained why the Count was reluctant to show his work in public. The Duke clarified that this was questionable behavior for an artist. He added that there was no reason to trust the girl. The boy reasoned in his mind. He understood that strong measures were needed if everything Inessa said was true. and he added that then the Countess would need help. The Duke noted that despite the high position of the Briarton family, simple assistance would not be considered a political game. His thoughts were interrupted by Inez. The Countess stated that she knew that the Duke could not help her. The girl specified that she wanted to offer a job, and according to her, no one would suffer from this. She stated that she would like to completely destroy her husband and become an independent woman. The Duke was clearly tense. The guy suggested that the girl talk to her husband. He specified that if the Countess wanted to write an article about it, then there needed to be a good reason. The blonde asked again what she wanted to achieve by exposing the Count. Inisa lowered her head. The girl understood that she was nobody to the Duke and that he had his own woman. The Countess clarified for herself that the interlocutor's wife was her friend Charlotte. The girl clenched her fists. She told herself that in their country, it was difficult to get a divorce for infidelity. Inisa continued to tell herself that her life had been wasted. She understood that she had given her life for her husband so that he could become famous. After some thought, the girl said out loud that she would like to return everything that belonged to her. The Duke realized that the Countess's goal was to confiscate her husband's property and title. He realized that the girl was going to do all this through Elton. The guy asked again if Inisa was sure of her decision. He explained that his newspaper was read all over the kingdom, that after such an article, the scandal could affect the Countess herself. The blonde said the article was tempting, but he thought it would be better to think carefully before making a final decision to act. The girl lowered her gaze in embarrassment. Insa was surprised that the stranger cared about her more than her husband. The Countess repeated again that she had already decided everything for herself. The Duke led her down a corridor somewhere. He noted that the article had to be sensational for everyone to see it. Before entering the room, the guy began to explain that the most important thing was to prove that Ryan's paintings were painted by his wife. The blonde noted that he had several of the Countess's works, and all she had to do was copy them. Inisa walked around and looked around the workplace. She thought that 3 years had passed, and much had changed since then. But the girl assured herself that her talent had not changed. The girl braided her hair for convenience. She touched the canvas and smiled happily. The Countess set to work resolutely. She tried as best she could with all her strength. As it turned out, the Duke was standing behind her the whole time. He asked if the girl had finished her work. Inisa was very scared because she had not known about the guy's presence until the last moment. He immediately apologized. The girl moved away from the painting. She clarified that there was still a little bit left before the painting was finished. The Duke reassured her, saying that it was not a problem. The boy looked at this painting with admiration. He said that only a fool would not believe his own eyes. He wished her a good future and called the Countess the Hand of God. The blonde stood at the gates of his castle. Inisa was at her carriage. The guy wished her a good trip and asked her to be careful. The girl looked away, embarrassed. She handed him the handkerchief. The Duke immediately recognized his thing. Inisa smiled and assured that the guy had really helped her out in a difficult situation. The Duke came closer to take the handkerchief. He asked why the Countess was smiling like that. The girl immediately covered her mouth, thinking that it was unpleasant for the guy. Sussex insisted that he was pleased. He again warned the Countess to be careful. Soon, Inisa arrived at her house. She was immediately met by a maid. Mary was excited. The Countess asked what had happened to her husband. Soon, our heroine went into the marital bedroom. Drunk Ryan was snoring sweetly. His wife sat down next to him. The Countess took his shirt and saw traces of lipstick on it. Inisa smiled calmly, looking at her husband. The white-haired servant read out an article. He was talking about the situation in the Briarton family. The man clarified that the article also wrote about the Earl's relationship with Charlotte. The Duke admired Inisa's painting. The boy did not listen very attentively to the servant's story. The man asked again if Sussex was listening. The blonde apologized and turned to the gray-haired servant. The worker noted that the king would certainly be interested in the identity of the real artist. The boy did not listen again and continued to admire the painting. This was already beginning to anger the servants. The Duke began to remember himself when he was still a prince. People predicted that he would take the succession away from Edward. They praised the boy's talent, but someone noticed that over time he was starting to have an envious person. The old man in the memories praised the boy. The man suggested postponing the coronation of the elder brother of Sussex and waiting until the prince himself grew up. Everyone agreed with him. The nobles continued to laugh, saying that they must not forget Mr. Felix after the successor's coronation. The woman remarked that they were all one family. Afterwards, the Duke recalled how he came to his older brother in tears. The little blonde approached Edward. The future king responded to his brother with a smile. The boy asked Enoch why he cried so much. The brother stroked the Duke's head and calmed him down. Edward jokingly said that he would punish anyone who offended him. Enoch then concluded that the words nobleman were just empty words. His thoughts were interrupted by a gray-haired servant. The man noted that after the article was published, there would be a lot of unrest. The Duke calmly agreed. Recalling, he said that when he renounced the throne, people were indignant for a long time. The blonde compared it to what would happen now after the revealing article. The boy reasoned that it could be such a strong article that it could attract even the people of the empire. He declared that the Countess of Briarton was indeed a genius. The servant was perplexed. The Duke explained that Inessa had ruined her talent by hiding in her husband's shadow. The blonde declared that he felt sincerely sorry for the Countess. The man asked what Sussex was going to do. Enoch thought for a moment. The Duke noted that it was necessary to attract the attention of the citizens of the kingdom. The guy said that he would organize an exhibition on his behalf. The blonde specified that the exhibition would feature Inessa's works. The gray-haired servant immediately tensed up. The man said that there would be a fuss right away. Enoch agreed with this and said that at least rumors would start. The blonde decided that the title of the future exhibition would become the title of the article. The next day, the news about the exhibition was already published. Everyone was talking about it. The newspaper said that Sussex wanted to support talented artists. This greatly interested Ryan and his mistress. Inessa also read the newspaper. She understood that something big was coming. Inessa was sitting and drinking tea. A joyful rayon came to her. The husband asked if the girl knew about the exhibition that the Duke was organizing. The Countess asked what the exhibition was about. The guy only replied that it was his chance to shine brighter. The brunette believed that his success should be a source of pride for his wife. Ryan said that it was necessary for his wife to paint the picture. He asked again if the Countess would do it. Inessa ignored her husband's question. The girl noticed that he was having lunch with her for the first time in a long time. Ryan tensed up and defended himself. He explained that he simply had a busy life with a full-time job and was therefore rarely home. The Earl suggested that after this conversation, he start coming home earlier. Inessa replied that she would think about her husband's offer. The brunette thanked the girl. She looked at Ryan and smirked. The girl reasoned to herself that her husband had already fallen into a trap. The Countess came to the Duke. The girl told him about her husband's request. Enoch replied that Ryan's greed knew no bounds. They began to discuss their future plan in detail. The plan was that Inessa would paint the picture, and it would be exhibited in 2 copies, one from Ryan and one from his wife. The blonde noted that rumors would start because of the similarity of the paintings. He was sure that in that case, people would find out about the Count's lie. The Duke specified that the girl would have to try to paint 2 identical pictures. Inessa thanked the blue-eyed guy for giving her the chance. Enoch asked if the Countess needed a place to paint the necessary works. The green-eyed girl said that she already had an idea about the place of work. The Duke and Inessa were walking along the crowded Huabang Street, heading to the right place. The guy praised the place and said how beautiful it was. Ew. The girl noticed that the street was convenient, because right there you could buy all the necessary items for work. In her mind, she was surprised that the Duke followed her, wanting to support her. She noticed that the blonde's beauty could not be hidden under his clothes. She also noticed that he could not avoid attention. Inessa compared the Duke to her husband. While Ryan avoided communication with ordinary people, Enoch, on the contrary, attracted attention. The green-eyed girl noted that it was advisable for them not to run into her husband. She also said that she had opened a workshop with art materials here. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a girl. The lady with the short hair immediately recognized Inessa. The Duke whispered to the Countess who the girl was. She immediately said that she was the owner of the studio. Inessa noted that it was easier to hide that way. The 3 of them went into the building. The girl told them about the top floor for the studio and immediately suggested going up there. Inessa and the Duke walked into the room. The blue-eyed girl invited them to look around. She also said that there was a gorgeous view through the huge window. The Countess opened the window without thinking and looked out onto the street. The green-eyed girl was touched by the view. The Duke approached Inessa. The owner of the studio said that after the inspection, she would be waiting for them downstairs. The blonde noted that the view from the window was truly wonderful. The blonde said that this place was ideal for inspiration. The Countess specified that this landscape from the window was what she wanted to paint for the exhibition. The girl continued admiring the place. She thanked the Duke for coming here with her. Enoch clarified that he wanted to do the same. Inessa noticed that the guy had spent a lot of his time and was clearly hungry. The long-haired girl took a sandwich out of her bag and offered it to the blonde. The blue-eyed boy looked at the food in surprise. The Countess immediately thought that Enoch would not have eaten such a thing, because he was an aristocrat after all. Enoch thanked his companion with a smile. The guy quickly ate the snack. He noted that it was too good for an ordinary sandwich. The Duke proposed a bet. It was that if the Countess achieved her plans and returned what was rightfully hers, then they would have a dinner for two. Inessa looked into his eyes, surprised that he wanted to have dinner with her. The Countess immediately agreed. The girl said that she would feed the Duke the most delicious food she knew. Enoch slyly replied to the artist that he would look forward to this event. The Duke walked in a commoner's costume, and no one recognized him. The guy went into the studio, where he was met by a blue-eyed girl. Miss Wren greeted them immediately. The blonde asked where Inessa was now. The blue-eyed girl replied that the Countess was already on the top floor. The owner of the studio noted that the Countess was going to paint a picture for the exhibition. She also said that Inessa's paintings were amazing, but she was worried that the girl did not think about her health at all. Wren asked what kind of relationship he had with the Countess. She noticed that the blonde came to see the girl every day. The Duke did not answer these questions and went upstairs. Enoch began to think. He understood that since they looked like a couple, if everything came out, they would have a lot of problems because of it. The blonde knocked on the door warningly. He apologized as he entered the room. The Countess did not pay attention to the guy who entered and was focused on creating the painting. When Inessa saw Enoch, she was very scared. She told him to go into the room immediately and not to stand in the passage. The blue-eyed boy noticed that he knocked twice. The Countess explained that she might not have heard because she was so concentrated. The Duke said he had bought some food and offered her some during a break from work. He said he had bought sandwiches because he thought the girl liked them. The Countess smiled at him happily. She specified that this was the first time someone had taken care of her. Inessa said that she had almost finished the paintings. The girl suggested looking at them. The long-haired girl clarified that the Duke had better evaluate her work immediately. The lady pulled the veil off the painting. Enoch admired the painting. She noted that it was this painting that would be exhibited under her name as Countess. The girl took the cover off the second painting as well. The blonde noted that it looked like a series of landscapes. Inessa specified that she painted it that way on purpose. In her opinion, due to the similarity of the paintings, everyone will guess that there was one author. Enoch was sure that the girl's plan would work. The Countess was glad that His Excellency liked her work. The Duke asked the girl if he could take the finished painting. Inessa denied it, specifying that she would like to take it home first. The Countess explained her actions by saying that perhaps her husband would like it and change his mind. The guy looked at Inessa with displeasure. The blonde understood that she was still holding on to Ryan. Enoch suggested that perhaps the green-eyed girl still hoped to receive praise from her husband. In the evening, Inessa returned to her house, where she was met by the servants. The mistress asked Mary to bring things from the carriage to her room. The Countess was about to go to the castle, but her husband's carriage arrived. The brunette was drunk again. The guy approached Inessa. The girl offered him to look at the painting she had finished. Ryan refused, saying that he trusted her completely in this matter. After that, her husband went to the mansion. He said that he wanted to drink more. The Countess looked at her husband sadly. Tears were welling up in her eyes. The day of the exhibition arrived. People were amazed that everything was held in the royal palace. Marcus Usher approached the entrance. He was the head of the Art Society. The man noted that no matter how many paintings were brought, only the worthy ones would be chosen. One of the commoners invited the Marquis to go inside. They walked slowly into the hall. All the people crowded around the two paintings. The head of art approached the crowd and asked what was going on. One man in the crowd explained that one of the paintings on display was by the Earl of Briarton, But another painting was very similar to it, although the artists were different. Inessa soon came to the exhibition. The green-eyed girl was surprised by such a large number of people gathered. The countess smiled shyly, wondering how she could get to the center of the hall. People began to look at the girl. When Inessa went inside, people started to bombard her with questions. But their questions were the same. The common people tried to understand how two paintings could be so similar. The countess clenched her fists with excitement. The girl understood that it was hard for her to receive so much attention, but she realized that she had worked long and hard to achieve this. Inessa, trying to calm her emotions, confidently declared to herself that she was happy with what was happening now. When she was already inside, someone suddenly greeted her. Turning around, the girl saw the Duke of Ssex. The guy came closer to her. The blonde took her hand and kissed her palm as a greeting. Other people noticed them and were shocked by their close relationship. Enoch said that the countess had attracted enough attention to herself. The green-eyed girl mentally praised the boy's courage. Then the Duke smiled and extended his hand to her. He suggested that they walk through the exhibition together. He explained that the exhibition was for Inessa. Afterwards, Enoch introduced Countess Brian to everyone. The Duke loudly declared that it was the girl who had created the decoration for the entire exhibition. This attracted the attention of all the people. The blonde clarified for everyone that Inessa was the hand of God. The long-haired girl squeezed his hand tightly. All the visitors to the exhibition were shocked. One of the girls concluded that since the lady was an artist, Ryan was a fraud. Ryan himself was lying in bed and resting. Charlotte ran to him with a newspaper. The Count was perplexed, and she made him read the article. The brunette picked up the newspaper, and the page was open. The newspaper said that the Count was a fraud. The blue-eyed girl started screaming at her lover. She clarified that it was tabloid journalism, and that the whole city had already read it. The Count immediately hurried to come to the exhibition. People noticed his appearance and discussed his impudence. Soon Ryan noticed his wife in the crowd. The man began to yell at Inessa. The brunette came close to the Countess. He began to accuse her of having ruined all his desires. Inessa did not react to his furious cry. The girl pushed his hands away. She noted that she had done everything he wanted, and she specified that she had given him all her glory. The Countess said she wasn't going to write for Ryan anymore. The brunette asked her again. He was very scared. Inessa repeated her words. The girl also proudly asked how long her husband was going to use her. The green-eyed girl pressed herself against the brunette. She quietly noted that Ryan was like a parasite. The Count tried to attack his wife, but he was immediately seized by the guards. People were shocked by his rude behavior. The brunette noticed that Inez had changed radically. He did not understand what all this could mean. At this time, the Duke approached them. The blonde said that he was glad to meet Ryan. Enoch clarified that it was strictly forbidden to harm others at the exhibition. He noted that this could cost the Count his reputation. Ryan began to frantically think about the situation. The brunette realized that the Duke himself was involved in all of this. Inessa turned to her husband. She told him to return home to the mansion, and then she noted that she would send a letter about the dissolution of the marriage. The next day, a new article appeared in the newspapers. It spoke of the Count's divorce from his wife. Everyone was wondering who would benefit from the breakup of the marriage. King Edward read his brother's newspaper. He said that some pretty funny things were happening in his kingdom. Enoch listened to his elder brother's reasoning. Edward was surprised that the younger prince was so interested in the girl. The king remarked that he thought that the countess's life was a fairy tale after her marriage. He explained his opinion by the fact that the girl stopped showing herself in society. Edward asked with a smile whether it was worth it for him to visit his brother's exhibition. The younger brother asked him to calm down. The blonde noticed that the lady was not having an easy time. The guy also asked his brother to just watch. Enoch pointed out that even if the king had visited the exhibition, he would not have met the countess. Blue-eyed noted that the lady was busy with her divorce. After some thought, the Duke asked what verdict Edward had given. After a short pause, the older brother smiled awkwardly. He replied that he had not decided what his verdict would be. The king began to speak seriously. He said that he would make a decision after careful examination. Edward did not want to be biased towards either side. The elder brother advised the Duke that since he had decided to be on the countess's side, He should be prepared for the verdict. Inessa moved to the Hamilton Hotel during the divorce. This hotel was specially designed for popular guests. There were always a lot of journalists at the hotel gates. They all wanted an interview with the green-eyed girl. The lady stood at the window and looked at the whole crowd. The Countess noticed that her daily life had become a burden. She thought about the exhibition. The girl was shocked. Only one day filled all the newspapers. Her husband, unlike her, was constantly giving interviews. Ryan played the victim. But everyone understood that in Elton's newspapers, the brunette's excuses were worthless. Inessa clenched her fists in anger. She wanted to throw the Count out of the mansion. The lady reassured herself that there was no need for this until they were divorced. The Countess remembered Enoch. The long-haired girl understood that she had come all this way thanks to the boy's help. The lady's reasoning was interrupted by a servant. The guy asked for forgiveness, but said that he had let the man in despite the prohibitions. He clarified that the person who burst into the hotel was Viscount Go's wife herself. Inessa was shocked to hear the name. She was scared that her mother-in-law had come. The lady recalled the days before the wedding, when Ryan's mother said she was happy to be part of the family. The old woman said then that she could not heal the loss of her parents, but she declared that she would become the Countess's second mother. After Inessa remembered what happened after the wedding, the girl remembered how her husband's father and Ryan himself began to pump out Briarton's money. She also remembered how her second mother began to belittle her. The girl went down to her husband's mother. The old woman immediately began to express her dissatisfaction that she was not allowed into the hotel. The brunette got down to the main topic of conversation. She asked if the Countess understood what she had done at the exhibition. The mother-in-law started yelling. The old woman said that since Inessa was married, she should have obeyed her husband. The woman also did not understand how the Countess dared to treat her son like that. The lady sighed calmly. The green-eyed girl said that she would divorce Ryan. This shocked the brunette woman. The mother-in-law accused the Countess of not having given birth to an heir during all this time. She specified that in this way, Inessa was putting the entire honor of Briarton on the line. The long-haired girl became angry. The lady asked why the woman decided to talk about the honor of the Brighton family. The Countess specified that after the divorce, the county family's business would not concern them. She said that she was glad that everything was over. Viscount Go's wife was even more angry. The lady continued, "The thought about the children." The girl clarified that everything still needed to be sorted out with the children. Inessa told her husband's mother that Ryan had a mistress. The Countess mockingly suggested that her son might already have children. The mother-in-law lowered her head and sighed in relief. Looking up at her daughter-in-law, her expression changed. Auntie, as kindly as before, explained that the lady was still very young and did not fully understand their world. The woman approached the Countess, gently taking her hands. The brunette noted that all men sometimes had fun outside the home and that this was the norm. Inessa did not raise her calm but angry green eyes. The girl remembered the early loss of her parents. The lady understood that in any situation, her mother was for Ryan. She was always angry that her mother-in-law was aiming at the inheritance of the writer Beck. The Countess removed her hands from the woman. The girl called herself a fool for putting up with all the actions of her husband's family. The guards grabbed the enraged mother-in-law. The mother's face changed again. She stopped hiding her real emotions and screamed that the Countess would not get an easy divorce. The brunette assured the lady that she would not succeed and that she would not win in court. The woman also said that Inessa would still be on her knees and beg for forgiveness. The servants took the husband's mother out of the hotel. The girl pressed her shaking hands to herself. Mentally, she calmed herself down, standing motionless. Suddenly, with cries of the Countess's name, the door opened again. Slightly sweating, the Duke stood in the passage. The guy came closer to Inessa. Enoch explained that he just came to check everything. The lady answered sheepishly that there was nothing wrong. Only her mother-in-law dropped by to visit. A crowd of onlookers had gathered behind the half-open door. The girl noted that the showdown with Ryan's mother had caused a stir. The blond man said with displeasure that he had ordered the administration not to let anyone in. The Duke and Inessa met eyes and froze. The guy was a head taller and always looked down. He hesitantly offered the Countess to live in his mansion for a while. The lady opened her mouth in shock, not taking her eyes off the blonde. But she clearly didn't think for long. Jeez. A luxurious, huge house on the bank of a frozen river. All around was forest and mountains of snow, complete wilderness and no neighbors nearby. Inessa didn't think much about the house. She admired the forest more. The girl pressed her hand to herself from the slight chill. The Countess remembered about the divorce. There was only one day left before the trial. Enoch again inquired about the lady's moral state. She could not fully answer the question. The green-eyed girl only noted that there was a fear that she would suddenly lose. She realized that in that case, she would have to return to her husband and continue her old life. The blonde suddenly grabbed her by the shoulder. The guy assured her that there would definitely be no loss. The owner of Elton's said that his new girlfriend would definitely win. He promised it. Inessa couldn't help but laugh. She joked that it was the first time she had heard His Excellency raise his voice. The lady, in order to calm the Duke, noted that with him, she finally relaxed a little. Looking around the forest, the Countess's gaze stopped at one point. A couple of rabbits were sitting on the snow. Inessa immediately began to make a sketch of them, but remembering that she was not alone, she turned to Enoch to find out if he was willing to wait while she drew. The guy did not forbid her. The lady squealed with joy. She was very touched by those hairs. The blonde watched her joy and was thus pleased himself. The Duke folded his arms across his chest. Enoch's head was spinning with Inessa's words about how he raised his voice. His lordship himself was embarrassed that it was difficult for him to control his emotions in front of his friend. The final day had arrived, the day of the divorce hearing. People were seated all over the courtroom to hear the verdict on this whole situation. The king sat above everyone on the throne. He announced the beginning of the trial. Edward looked at the jury and their lawyers. Without thinking twice, the monarch turned to the party that was against the divorce. First, he wanted to hear their opinion. Ryan's lawyer stood up. A serious man with a thick mustache. People whispered, discussing the lawyer. As it turned out, he was a professional divorce specialist, Viscount Turner. The man cleared his throat and began his speech. His speech was based on what he considered to be a strange matter. He considered the Countess's arguments about the appropriation of her paintings to be nonsense. The king interrupted the lawyer. Edward noted that there were identical paintings at the exhibition, but from different names. The mustachioed man explained the similarity of the paintings by the fact that the couple had been painting together for a long time. The lawyer decided to end his speech with accusations against Inessa. He loudly declared that all the empty accusations of the girl only spoil the reputation of Brereton, as well as the court. The Duke sat at the end of the hall, hiding under his hood. He was tense about the audience's opinion. People believed the Count relatively, because there was no full proof of the theft. The king, having heard their opinion, turned to the lady. He offered to hear the opinion of the party, who wanted a divorce. Her lawyer rose up nervously and loudly. As the lawyer stood up, his papers almost fell, and in the confusion, he gathered them up. The young man, nervously, introduced himself. His name was McDowell. People, seeing the Countess's lawyer, began to whisper again. Commoners were worried about her. Everyone thought that at that moment, the head of the family simply had not managed to find a suitable lawyer. Inessa was surprisingly calm. The lady saw the future in the young man. The girl imagined that the guy would become the first lawyer in the kingdom. The Countess looked at the king. Her emphasis in court was not on the expensive lawyer, but on the future. The young lawyer began his speech. He asked the opposite side to confirm their words regarding the identical style of drawing. The mustachioed man calmly confirmed his words. The young man invited everyone to look at the paintings. These were the paintings that were at the exhibition. Afterwards, the lady's lawyer turned to her husband. He asked Ryan to describe the process of working on the paintings. The brunette began to talk about the transparency of color, about the concentration of paints, about layers. Inessa was completely concentrated. The girl understood that her husband did not understand anything about drawing, and his words were only on the advice of his lawyer. The lawyer asked the final question. He suggested that the Count had been working under the table to avoid divorces. Ryan, unsuspecting, confirmed the guy's assumption. The mustachioed man grabbed his customer by the shoulder. The man understood that he had made a serious mistake in his words, and the Count did not understand anything. The young man answered with a smile that the paintings were done using the wet-on-wet technique. The boy in glasses concluded that the other side had no idea how the paintings were done. The husband's lawyer and Ryan himself began to justify themselves. Shouting in unison, they tried to prove that these were just slips of the tongue. The mustachioed man said that then let the lady tell the real story of the painting. Inessa, throwing her head back, answered calmly. She told where the picture came from and how it was painted. The young man in glasses addressed His Excellency. The young man stated that the Count did not know any information about these works. The lawyer again turned to the opposite side. The guy did not understand, since the Count painted the pictures, then why he was so confused. The rest in the hall whispered and were already on the side of the wife. The man, who looked nothing like him, began to tearfully explain that his client was simply stressed out about the divorce. The lawyer argued that Ryan's nervousness could have caused his testimony to be inconsistent. The Count's lawyer began to recall how his client proposed to the lady. He noted that the young couple had sworn their love to each other, but now everything had been destroyed because of Inessa. The guy thought about his competitor's words. He understood perfectly well that it was just a trick so that everyone in the hall would sympathize with the Countess's husband. The mustachioed man addressed the lady. He sincerely said that he understood Inessa and her resentment towards Ryan. The lawyer stated that her husband had not been so faithful to her after the wedding, but he also specified that this was just the inevitability of social life. The lawyer believed that the woman was simply lonely because her husband was often absent. The man asked again whether this was such a problem as that it was necessary to resort to perjury. His words infuriated Inessa. The lawyer finished his speech by saying that it was not worth so much fuss and that it was better to stop the case and leave them together. The lady did not tolerate such words addressed to her. She raised herself and rested her hands on the table. The green-eyed girl stated that Ryan loved one, but was with another woman. The Count sat in a cold sweat. The brunette pretended that he did not understand the girl's words at all. Inessa grabbed the newspaper. It was the Elton newspaper, published on the day of the trial. It spoke of her husband's accusation of treason, and there was evidence. The Duke's hour had arrived. At Enoch's click, the servants began to bring out stacks of newspapers. His subordinates quickly began to distribute them to everyone present. People read the papers and whispered again. Now everyone understood why the Countess asked for a divorce. Everyone began to understand that Ryan was a cheater. Inessa continued her speech. The lady loudly declared that no family life had ever existed, and that her husband needed the title and reputation of an artist. Ryan was simply taken aback. Screaming, he declared that this was all the ravings of a crazy woman. His lawyer tried to stop and calm him down. The king showed up. Edward began to draw conclusions. The guy said that he had listened carefully to both sides and declared that at this point it was already possible to make a decision on the matter. But in order for the decision to be completely reliable, the monarch proposed a deal. The spouses would draw the street of workshops anew right in front of everyone. The Countess's side was fully prepared for this. The court workers brought everything for painting pictures. In a couple of minutes, everything was ready, and the artists were sitting in their places. The king announced the start of the authentication. While the Count was nervous and trying to draw at least one line, his wife was calmly drawing the template of the house. The whole hall watched their work. A few minutes later, the servant who was keeping track of the time announced that it was time to finish. And so the hour of checking the authenticity had arrived. Before the paintings were shown, the king stopped everyone. Edward asked the Countess if she really wanted to divorce her husband. The king concluded that Inessa's goal was to restore her name and property rights. The monarch slowly brought everything to the final question. He asked if the guarantors of the Countess's goal were the king's name, then would the lady continue to live her married life with Ryan? Inessa answered without hesitation that she was against the king's proposals. The Countess recalled and told the story of the day when Ryan proposed. Then she thought that marriage would make up for all the shortcomings in her life. The girl hoped that marriage would give her the family she never had. The lady noted with chagrin that she had believed that the Count would heal all her wounds. Her ladyship stepped into the middle of the room. She recalled the feelings she had experienced over the past month. She recalled the people she had met. The green-eyed girl calmly, without a drop of regret, stated that she did not want to return to the past and was ready for a divorce. Inessa happily declared that this moment was the acquisition of a second life. The king, having listened to the countess, continued his speech. Edward began to officially declare about the final verdict. Ryan stood there in a cold sweat and could not utter a word. The monarch declared that from that moment on, the Briarton marriage was over. From that moment on, the title of head of the family returned to Inessa. Excellency officially declared the end of the trial. People were in a turmoil and quite loudly discussing everything that was happening. Many wanted to understand what would happen to the former count now. Ryan tried to talk to his ex-wife, but when he was already approaching her, the Duke suddenly blocked his way. Enoch's eyes were cold and clearly angry. He asked again what the brunette wanted from the Countess. The guy began to justify himself by saying that he wanted to talk to Inessa for a short while. But the blue-eyed Duke did not allow him to do so, explaining that the lady was tired after the meeting and it would be better to talk to her another time. His lordship took the girl by the hand and led her away from her ex-husband. Ryan tried to address her somehow, but the lady did not respond to him at all. The Duke led Inessa into a mysterious passage. The blonde noted that reporters could not get into this place. The Countess wanted to ask something, but the king himself suddenly appeared behind her. Edward declared that the passage was only for the royal family. The monarch specified that the girl had to thank the Duke of Sussex. He explained that his younger brother had asked permission for the lady to use that passage. The king did not hesitate to praise the Countess's courage. He declared that the trial would be a good precedent for those who also suffered in such situations. Edward said that he was leaving in a good mood. He waved goodbye to his brother and Inessa, thus saying goodbye to them. The Duke inquired about the Countess's condition. The blonde made excuses, saying that His Majesty had always been such a prankster. Inessa remembered this past. For her, these feelings were the first. Understanding that the past would never return was a shock. The lady burst into tears of happiness. She solemnly thanked the Duke for everything, but the guy was more frightened, not understanding why she was crying. The blonde took her cheek tenderly and began to wipe it. The blonde said that it was not worth shedding tears on that beautiful day. Touching the girl's forehead, Enoch tensed up because the lady's face was hot. Inessa noted with embarrassment that her head was spinning, and then she suddenly fell to the floor. The Duke ran closer, trying to lift her up. While the boy was calling someone for help, the Countess laughed loudly from awkwardness. But in her soul, she understood that now she was calmer than ever. Meanwhile, in another house, Charlotte was tearing up a newspaper in anger. In a rage, she remembered Inessa. Cursing. Shooing. The blue-eyed girl declared that she would take everything from the lady. The lady woke up in her bed in her palace. Mary woke her up. The girl looked at her room with fear. Inessa sat down on the bed, pressing her hands to herself. She tried to understand how she ended up here. There was a fear that everything that was happening was a dream. The servants stood waiting for new orders. The Countess, shouting, asked how she had returned to the estate. Afterwards, she tried to find out how the trial had gone. The maid smiled sweetly, stating that the mistress had won in court. The servant clarified that the girl was now the rightful head of the family. The lady got up from the bed and came closer to Mary. The maid proudly said that now Inessa was no longer a countess for her, but a mistress. The woman also said that the Duke brought the lady to the estate. The maid brought the basket, saying that it was a gift from Enoch. Inessa saw the flowers and remembered that at their first meeting, she painted a still life with the same flowers. The green-eyed girl took the note with wishes for a speedy recovery. The lady smiled shyly. She was touched by His Majesty's attentiveness, as well as his handwriting. There was also a newspaper in the basket. It was a fresh newspaper which told about the results of the trial, as well as the whole truth about the relationship between Ryan and Inessa. The Countess reread the entire newspaper. The girl admired the efforts the Duke had made before this article. The lady concluded that now she needed to solve the remaining problems. Meanwhile, their studio was undergoing dramatic changes. The former Count stood in the middle and tried to stop the workers and find out what was going on there. Inessa appeared behind him. The girl said that she had started the whole thing with the changes in the studio. The brunette knelt before his ex-wife. The guy asked her to reconsider and think about the decision to divorce. His voice was pitiful. Ryan made a fool of himself. The ex-husband praised the lady, saying that she was a wonderful wife, and he slandered himself, saying that he deserved to die for being so stupid. In a pitiful and quiet voice, the boy asked for another chance. The Countess listened to this pity with pleasure and enjoyment. She clearly liked that now they were kneeling before her, and not the other way around. Inessa started telling about the studio. She said that the studio was created for her husband, that the girl personally chose all the smallest details and wallpaper especially for Ryan. Afterwards, she remembered the day of the betrayal again. With a smile, Lady noted that despite all the efforts, it was in this studio that her husband cheated on her with Charlotte. Coming closer, the girl took the frightened brunette by the chin. The Countess calmly said that she trusted her husband and her friend, and they abandoned her like that. Inessa nudged him slightly and turned away. She congratulated Ryan Gott on his divorce. She also wished him a good life, although she mockingly said that she did not imagine a happy future with the former count. Ryan was furious at her words. The guy tried to grab the lady. He probably wanted to hit her, but it didn't happen. The guards quickly grabbed the brunette and threw him to the floor. Their evil looks could scare many, but their strength could calm anyone. Inessa remembered her childhood. Only now did it dawn on her that all the servants were always on her side. They were always there and did not abandon her even in difficult moments. With a sneer, the Countess gave the order. Her order was simple: take Ryan away from the studio. The guards quickly and without thinking took the ill-wisher away. Mary brought a napkin so that the lady could wipe the dirt from her face. Inessa loudly and joyfully thanked each servant. The Duke of Sussex appeared in the passage to the studio. The blonde noted that the lady had already settled the situation, and she wanted to ask how Enoch ended up near the studio. He did not let her ask, answering that he was just passing by. The Duke walked inside, looking at the vastness of the building. He was curious whose studio it was. Inessa explained that it was her ex-husband's studio. She told how she put her soul into this place. Coming closer to the window, the Countess tore down the curtain without thinking. The lady happily declared that it was now easy to get rid of the studio. The Duke suggested that it could be turned into an exhibition space or something similar. The guy tried to understand why he felt sad when Inessa talked about her husband, and why his older brother had ordered him to do all this. But at the end of his reflections, he concluded that he understood everything. Turning to the Countess, he reminded her of the promise about dinner after everything was over. The lady agreed without hesitation. She happily declared that she was ready to pay for all the help provided by the Duke. But Enoch refused the money. His only request was to paint a hand-drawn portrait. The guy wanted the Countess to draw him. In his mind, he understood that this way he would see Inessa more often. A couple of days later, the Countess began to paint a portrait of His Highness. The girl constantly asked him to bend over in different ways, or to hold his head differently. The Duke was confused by what was happening. The blonde casually remarked that they could have chosen a normal composition, and not such a vulgar one. Inessa smiled sheepishly. The lady justified her ideas by saying that the portrait would be painted for her close friend. That's where such energy and bright ideas came from. Enoch sat down in a more modest pose. The Countess continued working on a new sketch. She was completely focused on her work. His lordship recalled breakfast with his brother. The king kept asking about Enoch's feelings for the Countess. This was beginning to anger the Duke. But the monarch did not dodge the question. He was surprised that his younger brother used his status and position for the first time to help someone. The king repeated his question. The boy was still trying to squeeze words out of Enoch about the beautiful Countess. The Duke, closing his eyes, nevertheless agreed. But he noted that before the lady interested him only as a brilliant artist, but lately the blonde felt partial to Inessa herself. Having finished the sketch, the Countess called the model to her. The girl noted that the Duke had done an excellent job, but her words were interrupted by His Grace, who explained that the main credit for the portrait went to the artist herself. Inessa asked Enoch if he liked the sketch. Naturally, he agreed and specified that the beauty of her painting made him feel embarrassed. The Duke, reasoning, said that they would obviously need to meet at least a couple of times. But the blonde was also interested in the artist's opinion. Enoch was interested in the lady's plans. She wanted to change the studio, but for the sake of the portrait of the lady, she left the workshop as it was. Inessa explained her actions by the fact that since she was painting the Duke's portrait in this place, she was clearing the workshop of bad memories, filling them with new and bright ones. The Countess puffed out her red cheeks from the awkwardness of the moment. Enoch concluded that, for her, he was a warm memory. The blonde smiled brightly, saying that it was all sweet and pleasant to his soul. The lady began to understand that he began to see her as a girl. Inessa squeezed the end of her dress to calm herself. In her head, she said that she shouldn't jump to conclusions without knowing what the Duke felt. The lady came to a realization. Perhaps she began to see the lordship as a man, because, to her surprise, she devoted too much time to the ordinary picture. And the girl was surprised by the fact that with Enoch, there was always warmth in the soul. Their thoughts and the fog in their heads were dispelled by the mist bucket. The water spread all over the floor. The Countess called the servants and tried to prove to herself that all this was just respect for the blonde. But Inessa couldn't stop thinking. Remembering all the help Enoch gave the girl, she began to fear that rumors would start about their special relationship. The Duke took her hand and began to shake it gently. The guy was worried about her worried face. Thus, he returned the lady to the real world. The Countess, with her head down, decided that she shouldn't let the lady into a close relationship. Inessa was worried about Enoch's reputation, which could suffer because of the girl's uncertain feelings. She sadly said that she was already tired after the whole day. She also specified that she wanted to finish their meeting for that day. The Duke, having no choice, calmly agreed to the lady's request. About an hour later, having collected his things, Enoch came to his karate. The Countess, as expected, saw him off. At parting, the blonde asked the girl to take care of herself. Having already approached the carriage door, his lordship turned to Inessa. The guy declared that from now on, the lady as an artist, as well as the mistress of the county, will shine. The final words were simple but unforgettable. It was an honor for him to see the Countess spread her wings, and to see her in such moments. The carriage of the lordship sped off into the sunset. Inessa watched it and enjoyed the sunset. The lady took hold of her red cheeks again. The girl faced the question of what to do next, and what to do with those feelings. In the kingdom of Lancaster, ordinary, everyday and quiet days began. After the end of the trial, nothing special happened. The king sat sipping coffee and reading the latest Elton newspaper. He was surprised by the fact that the Duke's sales had grown rapidly. A beautiful girl appeared on the threshold in front of the table. It was Elena, or rather, Queen Elena. Coming closer, the monarchy asked what was so interesting in the newspaper. Edward suggested that she read the article herself. Taking the newspaper, his wife immediately recognized Baron Jason's daughter. The blonde clarified that it was with this girl that Ryan Gott had cheated. The guy was surprised by the fact that his wife knew Charlotte. Looking down, the queen began to recall the day she met the young lady. The Countess and her annoying friend were walking in the garden. The blue-eyed girl was constantly talking about something. This time she kept asking the servants questions. The guy calmly told her about the gardener's work, but she kept interrupting him. She would proudly and quite loudly declare her name. Afterwards, Charlotte would tell everyone so that they would remember her nickname. Off to the side, people were discussing Inessa's friend. Among others, she was called Charlotte the Leech. One woman didn't quite understand this nickname and asked for an explanation. The bob-haired man quickly explained. From his words, it turned out that the nickname appeared from Charlotte's constant pursuit of the Countess of Brearton. The man in the gray tuxedo noted that their friendship had lasted for a very long time, and that was most likely why Inessa kept her friend close to her. One of the staff solemnly announced that Queen Helen was coming out. Everyone quickly fell silent and turned towards the exit. The lady approached her ladyship and greeted her formally. The monarchy was pleased to meet an old acquaintance, but Jason's daughter showed up, screaming her name and greeting loudly. Ellen smiled shyly and noted that Inessa's friend was quite an energetic person. Charlotte did not stop talking. She was pleased with the fact that she was having a dialogue with Her Majesty. She also casually said that she would like to attend the tea party at the palace. The girl loudly declared that in such weather, the best thing would be to go boating. Near the kingdom was the Hampson River, and nearby was an island. The Countess immediately became frightened and approached her loud-voiced friend, trying to calm her down. The Queen's gaze became completely transparent. Charlotte did not know about the incident when the monarch's cousin drowned in that very river. Having finished the story, Elena felt sick from the memories of her brother. Although in her soul, there was such a thought that Jason's daughter might simply not know this story, but this did not change the essence. Edward's wife decided to change the subject and tried to force a bright smile. Having changed the subject, She noted that she was amazed by Inessa's actions. The king concluded that it wasn't just that they didn't know much. After all, he himself was amazed by the fact that Enoch was trying so hard to help a man he didn't trust. Her Grace suggested inviting the Duke to dinner with her. She specified that there would be a serious conversation. Edward remembered that there would soon be an important event. With a smile, his wife reasoned that perhaps His Excellency would be interested in this. The carriage drove up to the high gates. There stood one of the guards, who asked to show the invitation. The coachman handed over the envelope without thinking. The knight, seeing the name on the letter, was shocked. He opened the carriage door. The young man extended his hand to help the Countess of Briarton. As she approached the door to the mansion, Inessa reasoned that this was the first party at which she would be seen after regaining her title. This tea party was given by Baroness Wickham. The lady convinced herself that she must not show the county's weakness, despite the scandal. Inessa's attention was drawn to the loud discussion about the Duke by her old friends. The girls discussed the relationship between the Countess and His Excellency. They were pleased by Enoch's insight. Miss Wickham was pleasantly surprised that the fading Elton had once again become the largest press in the kingdom. She continued her reasoning, remembering the question of the succession to the king's throne. Miss also recalled her first meeting with the Duke. Seeing his appearance, she assumed that Enoch had deliberately kept away from the throne. Having finished her reasoning, the girl remembered her guests. It was already time to let everyone into the party. So that the Countess would not be found out that she had overheard everything, the girl herself ran inside, pretending that she had just arrived. Inessa shyly folded her hands to herself. The lady explained her embarrassment by the fact that she had not been to a tea party for a long time. One of the guests said that she could not imagine how hard it was for the Countess after those situations. A frightened servant came running to the whole company. Asking for forgiveness, he reported that some young girl asked to be let into the mansion. This angered the owner of the mansion, and she simply ordered that the young lady be thrown out. But at the same time, she asked who was there. The servant explained hesitantly that Charlotte had been outside, looking around the mansion from the gate. The Baron's daughter angrily clenched her fists, telling herself that she would not leave all this without taking revenge. Everyone's favorite, the main rose of all banquets, the dazzlingly beautiful Charlotte Jason. That's what the girl was called in all circles before. Charlotte used to think that her title, which she earned through her own labor, could not be taken away from her. The Baron's daughters began to receive many letters. Mostly they asked about the veracity of the newspapers or about the cancellation of invitations to the reception. Just a little more, and she would have started tearing her red hair. Even her lover had suddenly disappeared, which naturally made her angry. Charlotte blamed the Countess for all her troubles. She did not want to admit the fact that her work was dishonest. Realizing the hopelessness, she could only hold her head. For herself, she chose the option that solving the problems needed to start with a meeting with Inessa. Soon after, that same day, Charlotte arrived at the county palace. She was greeted unkindly by the servants. Mary reported that her mistress had not allowed the girl to enter. Clenching her fists, Lady Jason began to shout her displeasure to the servants. The lady quickly reminded of the old order about open doors for her. But Mary said that the order had long been invalid and added that if a meeting with the lady was needed, it had to be arranged by letter. Charlotte didn't really understand these new rules. Mary repeated a little louder and more rudely that it was simple ethics. The servants began to reproach Miss Jason. She said that Inessa had already done enough favors because of their friendship. Charlotte, naturally, was angry about all this. Without holding back her emotions, she said that the Countess had done nothing for her. Mary, blushing slightly, declared that the conversation was over. And then she remarked that her mistress was not at home anyway, and that she had been to tea with Mrs. Wickham. Charlotte was left alone near the gate. She remembered how Wickham had cancelled her invitation at the very beginning of the scandal. The girl firmly decided for herself that it was a conspiracy against her. Miss Jason continued to reason. In her opinion, if she starts blaming Ryan for everything, Inessa will quickly forgive her. Her plan was to regain the Countess's trust and then start spreading dirty rumors to ruin the county's reputation. At Wickham Mansion, the girl's arrival was discussed. The mistress and her servants discussed canceling the invitation, but the servant reported that despite this, Miss Jason wanted to meet the Countess of Briarton. The missus ordered to simply throw Charlotte away. but her order was abruptly stopped by Inessa. The lady noted that it was because of her that her former friend had made such a scandal, and that it would have been better to let her in order to avoid unnecessary gossip. After some time, one of the workers finally opened the gate for Lady Jason. The Countess drank her hot tea without worry. The instigator of the meeting appeared in the passage. The rest of the room continued drinking tea, but silently looked only at the girls. Charlotte's worries were clearly building up inside her. She was shaking slightly, but trying to calm herself mentally. Having relaxed, Miss Jason began to speak sharply and plaintively. First, she thanked Inessa for allowing the meeting, and then she asked quietly whether there were any misunderstandings left between them. The Countess took a sip of tea and suggested that they talk calmly. To begin with, the green-eyed lady said that their style of communication should be corrected. The girl explained her words by the fact that the two of them were nobles with high titles and had to communicate accordingly. After the explanation, Lady Briarton offered to sit down. She also noted that this was the place Charlotte had been seeking. With a smirk, Lady Jason accepted the invitation to sit down. She also began to address you formally. Having stopped paying attention to Charlotte, the other ladies discussed the Countess's affairs. Inessa calmly said that despite the heap of troubles, nothing could be done. The tea party organizer said she was glad that her county could come to tea despite being busy. The lady was embarrassed and only said she was glad of the invitation. The Baron's daughter sat with her eyes downcast and silently listened to the others, holding back her emotions. Inessa approached Viscountess Filde. She was interested in whether it was true that her husband was engaged in importing ceramics. The Countess noted that she had heard about the success of that business. She was interested in the possibility of investing in that business. The long-haired brunette was pleased with her ladyship's offer. The girl specified that she would discuss the investment proposal with her husband. Charlotte pursed her lips nervously, not understanding a single word. The rest of the room began to remember the Duke. As it turned out, he now sat in the House of Lords. Lady Jason was reminiscing about the past. Before, she had always been the center of conversation, not Inessa. Mrs. Wickham wanted to start new gossip, but a sharp noise from Charlotte stopped everyone. The girl with red hair jumped up from her seat, spilling her tea on the table. The owner of the mansion was simply taken aback by the lady's actions. The spilled tea spread onto the floor of the table. No longer hiding her anger, Charlotte tried to figure out why she was being treated like a nobody. Without a trace of embarrassment, Miss Jason pointed her finger at the Countess. The girl accused her former friend of talking nonsense about her. Because of this, all the problems. Inessa, remaining calm, pretended that she did not at all understand the unfounded accusations against her. Her county explained that, firstly, she would not engage in such base actions, and secondly, she doubted that the other ladies would listen to her. Lady Briarton was slightly amused by Charlotte's bewilderment. She explained that it was only with her help that the girl had somehow managed to integrate into the capital's society. The Countess accused her former friend of having no order in her head and no perception of reality. She also noted that she should have kept her fantasies under control. Lady Wickham also decided to put in her word. She said that she had not intended to do anything drastic after that situation. But Charlotte's behavior at that moment completely disappointed her. Lady Jason tried to apologize for her behavior, but she was not allowed to say a word. The mistress ordered her servants to remove the insolent woman. The servants took the disgraced girl by the hands, offering her to leave calmly. The girl drilled Inessa with her violet eyes. Then she brazenly declared that she would destroy the Countess. Her ladyship responded calmly to all the empty threats, without saying a word. After tea, Miss Briarton returned to her mansion. There she was met by Mary. The lady immediately apologized for her long absence and for returning late. Inessa immediately saw the sad face of her servant. She reported about Charlotte's morning visit. The woman fearfully told that she had driven away her mistress's old friend. She also noted that she would accept any punishment for this. Listening to these words, Inessa could not stand it and threw herself into the strong embrace of her servant. The girl also quietly said that it was she who should have asked for forgiveness for everything. It dawned on her that her loved one had always been so close. The Countess blamed herself for wasting her life on empty love. Remembering her childhood again, it dawned on her that she had never thanked all the people close to her. Having calmed down and stopped the tight hug, Mary announced that a letter had arrived. The servant clarified that the letter was from the Duke of Sussex. This shocked but attracted the attention of her ladyship. Enoch, sitting at this table, was flying in his thoughts. But the king tried to interrupt his thoughts. When his younger brother finally returned to the real world, Edward wondered what the boy was thinking about. The monarch laughingly noted that his brother was clearly thinking about someone. Enoch, unable to contain himself, repeated again, but louder, that there was nothing special in his thinking. Edward asked him to guess why he had become so sensitive. His Excellency immediately assumed that such emotions were due to the Countess of Briarton. The Duke lowered his embarrassed gaze. He also tried to lie that it was not because of Anessa. Enoch rather rudely asked why his older brother was so downcast. As a joke, he suggested that the king had stopped answering his letters. And pointing at the sky, the boy was right. The Duke decided to tell a little about his girlfriend. In his opinion, Inessa felt uncomfortable with him at their last meeting, and his lordship also told his plans about continuing their meetings under the guise of painting a portrait. The guy was afraid that she could simply refuse at one point, and the meetings would be less frequent. The king didn't have time to answer because his wife appeared in the passage. She asked what the brothers were chatting about. Ellen approached the table. As a sign of respect, the Duke stood up to greet her. Her Majesty happily noted that she had not seen her husband's brother for a long time. The king said that their conversation was about Countess Briarton. The girl, shocked, said that wherever she went, there was talk about Anessa. The monarch said that she had an important request to make to the Duke. Naturally, the guy agreed to listen to her. From the Queen's story, it became clear that a joint exhibition with Coldorf was planned. Coldorf was a neighboring kingdom. For the last 100 years, there had been constant war and truce between them. In history, these events were known as the 100 Years' War. After all the conflicts ended, the two states began sending embassies to each other with improved relations. Since then, in order to establish friendly relations, cultural exchange programs between artists of the countries began. Over time, these exhibitions became a new battleground, with countries trying to make their exhibitions better than their rivals. Enoch hesitantly clarified that he knew the exhibitions had ceased to be held in the last few years. He wondered why the Queen had decided to hold the event then. Ellen explained that such traditions weakened over time. But she also noted that Lancaster was considered a conservative country where all the traditions were still preserved. But the years passed, and the era of open relations with the whole world was already coming. It was no longer possible to close oneself within the walls of one's castle and live exclusively there. The monarch said that it was necessary to get ahead of the times and get rid of the spiritual underdevelopment of their state. She specified that the joint exhibition was a good opportunity to demonstrate their openness. The Queen's request was that the Duke should ensure that everyone in Lancaster knew about the exhibition. Enoch immediately agreed to help. His lordship offered his candidacy for the exhibition a little hesitantly. Ellen asked with interest who that talent was. The Duke declared that the Countess was an excellent candidate. He vouched for Inessa's talent. Enoch also said that the problem with the exhibitions was that the artists had to be men. Because of this problem, their kingdom was laughed at by neighboring states. The monarchy summed up the results and asked again whether the talent of her county was worth pushing through her candidacy. The blonde confidently confirmed that it was worth it. Her Highness declared that the Duke was now responsible for selecting the artist for the exhibition. The boy thanked her and then bowed, saying that he had to go away. When Enoch left, the couple discussed him. The Queen was pleasantly surprised that the young man had transformed. Edward recalled how his brother used to worry about how people would perceive him at every step. He also noted that this was the first time the Duke had spoken about someone with enthusiasm. The king was happy for his brother, but Ellen clarified that for now it was better to limit themselves to moral support, because they did not know what was really on his mind. Inessa was sitting alone in the little room. In her hands, she was holding a letter from the Duke. The girl understood that she could not avoid his letters forever. It was even more strange to avoid the innocent Enoch. The Countess decided that it was time to write a reply. But a servant entered the room. The man said that he had brought the documents that his mistress had asked for. Her ladyship quietly hid the letter. The servant asked why Anissa needed a report on the state of her family's budget. The Countess explained that it was time to plug the hole in the budget. All this time, her ex-husband had been using the family budget to invest in his older brother's projects. Inessa suggested that Ryan did this to prevent the money from going towards alimony in the future. The Countess firmly decided that it was time to return all her family's money and restore its former glory. Ryan sat in the middle of a crowded bar drinking alcohol. Two men recognized the former Count. They both laughed at the guy. One drunk said that literally everything was taken from the brunette. Mr. Viscount heard those conversations. He was angry that he had to endure what was happening. Ryan thought back to when he owned all the wealth in the county just a month ago and tried to figure out why his ex-wife had suddenly changed. Two guys suddenly approached the brunette. They greeted him, and one noted that it had become more difficult to meet the former Count. The short boy mockingly suggested that Ryan had already died of shame from the divorce. The brunette was angry at those words. The narrow-eyed guy said that Mr. Viscount was the only one who had divorced for the reason of adultery in the entire country. He specified that it was the stupidest reason he had ever heard. The former Earl stood up abruptly, grabbing the ill-wisher by his clothes. Ryan said that the guy was no better because he was a suck-up when the brunette had the title of Earl. The guy slapped Ryan across the face. Afterwards, he calmly agreed with Mr. Viscount's words, but he noted that this was when the brunette was not the last person in the kingdom. A second guy showed up. He was almost a head taller. He said that the Baron's daughter burst into tears and insisted that the former Count himself had seduced Charlotte, and she had nothing to do with it. He also noted that such rumors were literally everywhere. Ryan was irritated that because of Miss Jason, he had to divorce Inessa, and she also began to spread lies about him. While the ill-wishers were distracted, Mr. Viscount quickly ran to the exit of the bar. The short guy noticed this and assumed that the brunette had gone to beg the Countess to take him back. Ryan wandered the dark and empty streets of the city. He also held his jaw where it hurt. Someone approached the brunette from behind. The stranger took the Meister by the shoulder. Turning around, the former Count recognized his brother. The older brother tried to find out how everything came to a divorce. Ryan slightly pushed his relative away. The guy also reproached him for having problems anyway, and the older brother began to reproach him. The senior Viscount said the Briarton family had said they were going to return all the money invested by the ex-husband's business family. The mustachioed brother explained that if all investments were withdrawn, their entire family would end up on the street. Ryan asked what they were supposed to do. The relative suggested that they should first appease the Countess with some kind of gift. The next day, the gift was already with Inessa. She was not particularly impressed by the gift from her ex-husband. Two maids were holding the huge bear, and one of them said that Ryan said he personally chose the gift. Her ladyship assumed that they were simply fussing after all the investments had been withdrawn. The Countess called this kindness complete nonsense. The lady said that the servants could have taken the bear for themselves. This greatly pleased the two young servants. When they left, the lady returned to examining her image. The girls thought that Mary had gone a little overboard with her choice of costume. Inessa remembered the Duke's self-portrait. The painting was almost finished. The lady was upset by this, but at the same time, she felt relieved. The Countess knew that spending so much time with Enoch could cause a lot of problems. Mary's voice was heard from behind the door. She said that the carriage was waiting for the lady. Her ladyship had decided that this would be the last meeting with Enoch. After some time, Inessa was in His Excellency's mansion. The blonde was not there yet. Approaching the table, the Countess remembered the past. It was on this table that her ex-husband's betrayal took place. The green-eyed girl smiled awkwardly. She also remembered that these memories used to bring disgust. But lately, the Countess could joke about it. Enoch slowly approached from behind. Her Highness immediately heard the guy. The blonde immediately greeted Inessa. The Duke came closer to his friend. His Excellency declared that he had something important to report. The blonde said he had something to say to the girl. She replied that she was ready to listen. The Duke hesitated. The boy said he hadn't slept all night. Because of this, he was worried that he would look haggard in the portrait. The girl took it as a joke from his lordship. She convinced the guy that there was no need to worry even if he had a sleepless night. Enoch looked surprised. The Countess complimented him that despite everything, he was graceful. She cheerfully asked if she could start work. The Duke, naturally, gave the go-ahead. Inessa warmed up her brushes. Sitting down at the easel, she began to work. Soon, with a beaming smile, she reported that the portrait was almost ready. The lady noted that only the finishing touches remained. She also specified that there was no longer any need for his lordship to come here. The Duke looked at them with his blue eyes in surprise. He concluded that in that case, this was their last meeting. The Countess turned her head away from the boy. She coldly and briefly confirmed his results. Inessa stood up. She clarified that the portrait was not finished yet, but she also suggested that Enoch take a look at the work. His Excellency suggested postponing this until the painting was completely finished. The Countess looked at him in surprise. The blonde began to remember the box with various sweets. The lady noted that she was given the same sweets in childhood. Enoch said that his favorite candy was caramel, but he also specified that his mother allowed him to have only one a day. Inessa listened attentively to the guy. She was shocked that the Duke was talking about something so personal. The blonde asked the girl which candy he ate first. The lady suggested that it was his favorite. The Duke said that it was wrong. Inessa began to listen attentively to the correct answer. Enoch responded to the girl's surprise that he ate the caramel one last. The guy noted that he enjoyed the anticipation of his favorite sweet. His lordship summed it up. He compared his favorite candy to the portrait the girl was painting. Smiling, the Duke said he had enjoyed the anticipation of the painting. He also said he would like to extend it all for a little while. After a pause, Inessa smiled happily. She claimed that his lordship's words made her happy. The lady suggested finishing for today. The girl specified that she needed to visit the Street of Craftsmen to buy more material. Enoch remained calm. He said that in such a case, nothing could be done. The next day, the two of them were walking along the Street of the Masters. The Duke was surprised by the liveliness of the streets. Inessa was interested in why His Excellency decided to come there with her. The Duke reminded her that he had promised to treat her to dinner. The lady was surprised and said that she thought it was just a joke. She was thinking about what she should do next. After all, the Countess had promised herself to stop communicating with his lordship. Inessa said that in that case they had to hurry. She specified that in order to have dinner, they had to have time to buy materials. The Duke quickly caught up with her. The guy suggested that they go together. He was happy with what was happening. Together they chose brushes for the work. Enoch showed genuine interest in this. While walking down the street, they had the opportunity to observe how a street artist was making a self-portrait of a girl. Inessa took out her small list. Of all the items, the only thing left was to buy paints at the studio. The owner of the studio, Madame Lant, was just passing by them. The woman, seeing the couple, screamed loudly. Madame recognized the Countess of Briarton. She was shocked that her friend was a countess. Enoch noted that she had most likely read the newspapers. Inessa came closer. The girl said that the owner of the studio could still call her Inessa, as before. Coming closer, the lady took it from her hand. She noted that for Madame Lunt, the girl wanted to remain a friend, not a countess. The woman had calmed down a little, but the Duke came up to them. He told her to call him Mr. Fitzroy. She screamed again in shock. In the evening, the two of them arrived at the restaurant. Enoch admired that the restaurant was in such a place. Her county noted that Madame Lunt recommended the place. Inessa told her experiences. She noted that, most likely, the blonde visited only luxurious establishments. The Duke did not deny it. Enoch looked away from the girl. He declared that any place was fine, as long as he was with the Countess. Inessa hid under the menu notebook. She didn't understand where the blonde learned to speak like that. The Duke remembered that he had not yet said what he had wanted to say that morning. The lady raised her head and began to listen attentively. His Excellency paused briefly. Then he announced that they would not be able to see each other for some time. Enoch explained that there would be an exchange exhibition with Koldorov. The Countess was shocked by this event. The blonde specified that the exhibition was held by Her Majesty. He also stated that he would be an assistant in organizing it. The girl said to herself that it was a relief for her. Inessa did not understand what was happening to her. She thought she would have to keep her distance. She had planned for their meetings to end that day. "Her ladyship's thoughts," interrupted the Duke. The boy looked at his friend in surprise. The green-eyed girl smiled awkwardly. She noted that, as far as she could remember, the last time Kaldroff had dealt with the organization was because of her. Enoch confirmed her words, but the guy said that the result of their organization was terrible. The blonde recalled that their delegation was stunned by the art of the neighboring state. The Duke said the exhibition was an excellent opportunity to establish an association of royal artists. Inessa smiled brightly. The lady offered her help in any form. She explained that the guy had helped her a lot too. A waiter stood above them. He cleared his throat loudly and asked if the couple were about to order. The two of them quickly began to choose something from the menu. The Countess mentioned that there was a very tasty grilled salmon. After a while, their order was brought to them. Enoch looked at such a quantity of food in shock. He was surprised that it was all a portion for one. Inessa noticed that only non-rich artists went there. The guy admired the huge portions. He looked at his companion in bewilderment. She laughed and explained her look by saying that she was not used to seeing him with such an expression on his face. Inessa explained that despite any emotions, the Duke's face did not change. The guy laughed awkwardly at his friend's observation. Enoch calmed his laughter. The boy replied that he actually had more emotions than the Countess imagined. The blonde said that the emotion was greater when he was next to Inessa. She looked into his eyes in surprise. They were having an awkward moment. The couple's attention was drawn to the people around them. In the alley, two small children were drawing all sorts of scribbles on the walls. An unknown artist tried to attract attention to himself. He told everyone passing by about his new work. A poor young artist demanded a discount on materials from a saleswoman. The woman complained that she herself had no money. The Duke broke the silence. The boy said that the Street of the Masters was an amazing place. He also said that art in their kingdom was something exclusive. The blonde man turned to the Countess. He asked about the artists. He was surprised by the fact that ordinary people had gathered and made such a street. Inessa calmly stated that there might not have been any reason for its creation. The girl said that ordinary people could not get a good education. Her ladyship noted that despite those difficulties, the passion for drawing could not be stopped. An idea suddenly came to Inessa. She suggested holding that exhibition on the Street of Masters. The Duke looked at her in bewilderment. The Countess continued her thought. She declared that it would be a pity not to take advantage of such a place. The two of them looked at the children again. The girl noticed that the desire to enjoy art in this place was present in everyone, regardless of social status. Her Highness summed up the results. The Countess suggested holding the exhibition as a festival. In this way, they would attract not only the aristocracy to art, but also commoners. Inessa clarified that with the help of the festival, they could get rid of stereotypes about inequality among artists in the kingdom. The lady said that it would be a great help to the development of the street's commerce. She also noted that it could cause disagreement among locals, but that could be resolved with compensation. Enoch asked what was appropriate compensation. Inessa quickly explained that it was simply reasonable compensation for shop owners. Her final proposal was to allow the street artists to participate in the exchange exhibition. In her head, she was thinking that she had crossed the line into communication. Reflecting, the Duke declared that it was a great idea. He also noted that the Street of Craftsmen was worthy of public investment. His lordship asked whether the Countess could present her ideas to the king. Naturally, there were no denials on her part. Enoch smiled happily. The guy said that her unexpected idea was a great help to him. Lady Briarton looked down, embarrassed. She was glad that her idea was so praised. After a long walk, in her mansion, the Countess relaxed in the bath all alone. The girl remembered how the Duke saw her off. At the end, he told her that he hoped that they would be able to spend time like this again. Inessa discussed his words with herself. She thought about the portrait. After its completion, they would not have the opportunity to hold personal meetings. The lady dove deeper into the hot water. She was slightly upset by the situation, but her sadness quickly passed. After some time, the girl received an invitation that she could not even imagine. The message was from Queen Helena, saying that she wanted to have tea alone with the Countess. Countess Briarton arrived at the Queen's palace. She was embarrassed by the fact that she came alone. It was unusual. The servant brought some document. After reading it, the lady was shocked. It said that she had been appointed manager of the exhibition. The document also included hopes that the girl would be able to bring glory to Lancaster. At the bottom were Queen Helena's initials. Inessa was thinking about this news. For her, it was a great opportunity to restore her good reputation, tarnished by her ex-husband. But she also tried to understand why Her Majesty chose the lady. After all, they were not exactly close. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. As it turned out, it was the Duke of Sussex. The Countess smiled awkwardly. She supposed that this might simply be a test of her. Inessa relaxed and turned to his lordship. She was interested in her friend's health. He answered that everything was fine with him. The girl asked if Enoch knew that she had been appointed as the manager of the upcoming event. The blonde immediately asked if this was an inconvenience to the lady. She quickly replied that it was a great honor for her, so it was not. The queen herself appeared behind them. Elena clarified that she would be embarrassed to force the countess if she was against it. The woman came closer. The monarch said that she was glad to meet. She also suggested discussing the transfer of the exhibition location. The queen was called the torch that lit the Knights of Lancaster. She was said to have made a great contribution to the kingdom, especially to the reorganization of politics. Inessa looked at the queen. It was a great honor for her to have tea with such a person. Elena started the conversation. She told that she had learned about the countess's wonderful ideas regarding the exhibition. The girl shuddered in fear at such words. The lady remembered that dinner on the Street of the Masters. She assumed that Her Highness was talking about that conversation. Her ladyship turned her gaze to the Duke. She tried to figure out how much Enoch had passed on from that conversation with the nun. Elena stated that she was completely satisfied with this format of the exhibition. She noted that it would be a wonderful exhibition this year. The countess lowered her eyes, embarrassed. She wanted to object to her words, but the queen interrupted her and said that she could no longer take her words back. Elena said that the appointment as manager was her personal reward to Inessa. She compared this reward to material property, noting that it was more than enough. Her Majesty added that she was even a little jealous of Lady Briarton. The countess continued to look shocked. Unexpectedly, Elena began to tell how the Duke spoke flatteringly of Inessa. Enoch, from these words, choked on his tea. His lordship turned indignantly to the queen, while the countess pondered her words. The blonde calmed his emotions. He confirmed Elena's words. The monarch added that the hand of God had no artistic flaws. Her Highness said that she simply wanted to meet Lady Briarton that day, and added that they would discuss the details of the exhibition later. The queen expressed her hopes that the exhibition would go well. The lady thanked her again for the opportunity. Elena suggested another cup of tea. Then she turned to the Duke, informing him that he could go. The woman reasoned that her husband was looking for his brother. He wanted to object to something, but the queen said more directly that he should leave. Enoch sighed and stood up from the table. He wished the girls a good time. The countess said her formal farewell. When the Duke left, the monarch remarked that he was full of nonsense. Inessa smiled awkwardly upon hearing this. The queen suggested that they now have tea in their female company. The countess repeated that it was an honor for her. Elena was thinking about the girl's behavior. From their first meeting, she thought that she was just a weak girl. She tried to understand where such changes in Inessa's character came from. The monarch also assumed that the Duke was attracted to all of this. The queen decided to help the boy. She repeated that the Duke had given the countess a flattering assessment. The girl blushed completely because of these words. Inessa began to quietly reason why he thought of her like that. The woman was shocked to think that Briarton also had feelings for the Duke. The queen said it was the first time she had seen Enoch interested in anyone, while the lady remarked that she had thought he had always been like that. Elena folded her hands together. She said that they would probably never understand men. The queen suggested telling about the Duke's past. There were no refusals from Inessa. She began to remember that the boy always understood that he was the second prince who was gifted. Enoch could also become the heir to the throne, instead of his older brother. The monarch said that for her and her husband, the Duke remained the same child who was afraid of being hated. 8-year-old Enoch ran down the corridor with a large book. He was hurrying to his mentor to quickly show what he had learned. His teacher admired the boy's work. The man in glasses said that he had nothing more to teach the boy. The mentor returned the book to the Duke. The boy wondered if his brother would praise his work. 2 ministers left the parliament session. Enoch became frightened and hid behind a column. They discussed Edward. One of them wondered if it was too early to appoint his older brother as heir. He continued the thought, stating that the nobles had gone mad. The man suggested that they discuss all this in a separate palace. The second minister spoke of Prince Enoch's popularity. The boy himself continued to eavesdrop on their conversation. They compared the brothers' talents. Their conclusions were that the younger one was much more talented. The bald man declared that it was better to strengthen the royal power. The second one suggested making Enoch the heir after all. The kid was very scared by this. The Duke's mind was increasingly filled with the words of the nobles. They all said the same thing, that it would have been better to make Enoch the heir. The previous king and his wife had no intention of sowing discord between the princes. Edward's ceremony went ahead as planned. The Duke and the future wife of the king stood apart from everyone else and applauded the ceremony. Little Enoch said that relief would finally come to him. Elena did not quite understand this and asked him again. The kid said he had never been interested in the throne. He also noted that his brother had no reason left to hate him. The queen recalled that even after the coronation, the interests of the nobles did not change. The second prince had to give up his beloved fencing. There were rumors that in this way he was preparing an assassination attempt on his brother. Enoch's nannies and teachers were constantly changing, because many of them tried to instill strange ideas in the Duke. Elena said that the second prince was constantly having breakdowns of suffering. He was constantly irritated by those rumors, but many years have passed since then. The Duke of Sussex has grown into an open and caring person. Inessa added that he eventually became the owner of Elton. The queen specified that he did this on purpose, in order to show indifference to the throne. Elenskina said that since his newspapers were founded, Enoch had even fewer close people. The monarch added that the guy valued his business. She asked if the countess was angered by the frequent articles about her. The queen clarified that all the articles were based only on solid evidence. She suggested that the Duke might have considered Inessa a sensible person. Elena said she didn't know what sense he was referring to. His character had always been a mystery to the queen. The woman praised Enoch's politeness, but she also compared that culture to a huge wall with which the Duke fenced himself off from everyone. His plan was to complicate the situation, and at the same time not let anyone know the weak points. The queen recalled their dinner together, where Enoch praised the countess as an artist. Then he assured the woman of the lady's abilities. Elena reasoned in her head. She assumed that with Inessa, he might be able to express more emotions. The monarch said the Duke had high expectations of Lady Briarton. She also said she had high expectations of her own. Inessa herself believed that she would justify her friend's expectations. After all, she wanted to see his lordship's happy smile. The girl appealed to Her Majesty. She said that she would try her best to live up to their expectations. The tea party ended at sunset. The countess walked to her carriage along a long corridor. She nervously asked herself if she had said something stupid at the meeting. The lady could not unclench her fists back and forth in order to calm herself down. After walking down a long corridor, she came out into a narrower and less crowded one. There, someone knocked her down. The man grabbed her hand. He asked for forgiveness. The girl smiled awkwardly. The stranger asked again if she was the Countess of Briarton. Then he said he wanted to warn the lady. He said that despite the Queen's order to appoint her as the exhibition manager, many of the managers were unhappy with this decision. He noticed that the man himself had the most weighty opinion. The stranger turned out to be the head of the Royal Association of Artists. The Marquis's expression changed abruptly. He, as if nothing had happened, asked the lady why she was there, as well as about her general condition. Inessa smiled happily. She explained that she had come to greet the Queen after the Countess had been appointed manager. The man was delighted by the fact that such an artist would work for the glory of their country. The girl was surprised to herself that the Marquis turned out to be nicer than expected. He apologized for keeping the lady for so long. Finally, he wished to take care of the Countess. The girl said goodbye and went to the exit. On the way, she crossed paths with another minister. The lady also greeted him. One of the nobles approached the head of the artists. Asher compared her appointment to a parachute. He said that she was as cunning as a fox. The man had no idea that Inessa could be such a simpleton. The second minister noted that they had to be careful. After all, they did not know what advantages the Countess had. The Marquise assured her that she would have nothing to say given her reputation as a domestic servant among the Royal Association. Edward asked why the Duke was taking so long to meet him. Enoch apologized for the wait. The king jokingly suggested that his brother was angry because he had been interrupted from meeting his girlfriend. His lordship ignored the question. He also asked how he could be of service. The monarch said that the exhibition had caused his wife a lot of inconvenience. He was in no hurry to continue the conversation. He was interested in whether the Countess was a reliable person. The king slowly put his glasses back in the box. The Duke asked in surprise if the Queen had not yet reported Inessa's ideas. His brother only replied that she had considered them quite fresh. Edward noted that he would never have thought of holding an exhibition on an ordinary street, where mostly only common people went. The Duke told how, thanks to the lady, he visited the Street of Masters. He believed that, since he was from the royal family, he should know every corner of their country. He remembered again all those people he had met on that walk. The guy concluded that in their kingdom, he didn't know many places. The king, having listened, turned to his brother. He admitted that the countess had a good influence on Enoch. The Duke did not understand these conclusions. The monarch explained that the boy had not previously been interested in the surroundings. The younger brother looked at Edward in surprise. He also noticed that Enoch always made a stupid face when talking about the countess. The Duke, in order to change the subject, asked since when they had switched to common language. The king laughed and said that he had nothing to say in reply, so he changed the subject. Edward understood that Enoch was slowly becoming aware of everything. He decided to stop teasing for now. Inessa reached her carriage. She was about to get in. It was almost dark outside. Someone suddenly addressed her. She stopped and turned around. The girl saw his lordship. The Duke thought she had gone straight home. He said he wanted to finally say hello to her. The guy asked if such communication was difficult for Inessa. The countess justified herself by saying that on the contrary, she had to look for him to greet him. The lady said that she had been allowed to participate in the exhibition. The Duke remarked that she had been allowed to participate only because of her outstanding talent. Inessa wondered what would have happened if Enoch hadn't helped her. Everything would have been as before. Ryan would most likely have passed her ideas on to the Queen himself. And he would most likely have claimed that the idea was his. The countess folded her hands and hesitated. She understood that she had to stop thinking about her ex-husband. The Duke assumed that the girl was thinking about Viscount Gott. He assured himself that since the county's marriage had recently ended, it was impossible for her to stop thinking about her husband. Enoch decided to change the subject. He said that he was glad to communicate with the countess. The guy also said that he would be glad to work with them together. Inessa looked at her friend happily. She noted that she was also looking forward to their work. After a while, all the headlines in the Elton were about the exhibition. It also said that the event was managed by the Countess of Brereton. Ryan found out about it. The former Earl was shocked by the news. The brunette gave up on his appearance and also drank even more. Ryan jumped up from his chair. He couldn't believe that a woman had been appointed manager. He was surprised that the royal family valued Inessa's talents so much. The brunette imagined that if he had not divorced the countess, then all the glory would have belonged to him. There were documents on the table with all sorts of reminders. The Viscount's family business was collapsing due to the withdrawal of investments. Because of the former account's reputation, he had no opportunity to borrow money anywhere. The boy clutched his hair. He couldn't accept the fact that his family was finished. Ryan knew that all this could not be allowed to happen. His only solution was to get off with Inessa again. The ministers discussed the countess and smoked cigars. They discussed how it was possible to hire an inexperienced lady to be the organizer of the exhibition. One of them said that the Queen had not thought about her actions at all. Another nobleman interrupted him. The man made him watch his words. He also noted that such words could be considered treason to the royal family, although he himself clarified that there really were doubts before that appointment. The minister looked at him in surprise and waited for an explanation. In the opinion of that nobleman, it would be good if the countess knew her place and did not interfere anywhere. But since this would not happen, he suggested that they act as they considered necessary. Inessa hurried to the meeting. In her hands were documents about that idea. Her beautiful dress highlighted her ladylike figure, which showed her determination. The girl assured herself that her first meeting was going to go perfectly. Her gaze was determined and bold, not like before. Approaching the entrance, the lady met the Duke. Seeing the girl, Enoch assumed that she was heading to a meeting. Inessa shared her worries. The blonde assured her that she would do everything perfectly, and there was no point in worrying. The lady was slightly reassured by his words. She raised her head to look into the guy's eyes. His lordship suggested that they go inside. After some time, when everyone had gathered, the discussion began. The Marquis did most of the talking. Asher said that there were only a couple of months left before the exhibition. He said that it was necessary to hurry because time was short. Everyone listened to him attentively. The man expressed his hopes that everything would go perfectly with the help of their team. He took his documents. The Marquis wanted to begin his proposals, but the Countess interrupted him. Lady Briarton suggested that the exhibition be held in the form of a festival. Everyone turned their gaze to her. The girl recalled that all previous exhibitions were held in the palace and with selected works. This time, she wanted to make the event free for any people, with any creations. In the lady's opinion, everyone will thus have the opportunity to enjoy works of art. One of the ministers simply laughed at this idea. He said that the Countess was talking nonsense. He began to explain that the exhibition had to bring in income. In his opinion, it was impossible to change everything in a couple of days. Inessa was not upset at all. She said that she already had a detailed plan and the amount needed for the budget. Another nobleman agreed with his employee's opinion. The man with the short haircut said that the street was for the poor. He suggested that it would be humiliating to show such a place to foreign visitors. The minister in the green suit accused the Countess of making radical changes, thereby, in his opinion, belittling the work of the Artists' Association. The Countess was frightened by all this. She did not understand why there had been such nagging before her. The nobleman explained that this year's exhibition was to change Lancaster's image. In his opinion, it was impossible to change everything at this moment. The Duke put his word in. The guy said that changing the look of the exhibit was a great idea. The ministers wondered why Enoch had suddenly stood up for Lady Briarton. They were very surprised by the fact. The Countess specified that it was not necessary to completely change the format of the exhibition created by the association. She assured that they would not be able to come to an agreement at today's meeting. The man sitting next to me slammed the table hard and sharply. He loudly declared that there was no need to change the format of the exhibition. The minister wanted to say that without the Countess's participation, the exhibition would have been successful, but the Duke interrupted him. Enoch reflected on how the kingdom was currently doing. He noted that the exhibitions that were held according to the old format had not yielded significant results. The Marquis, in order to silence everyone, struck the table. He asked whether his lordship's statement could be considered as contempt for the association. The head of the association did not wait for the Duke's answer. He stated that in that case, he could not be of any help. The man said loudly that in that case, the Artists' Association would not take part in the exhibition. The testament ended on such an unpleasant note. Everyone left the hall. One of the ministers followed the Marquis. He tried to understand whether those words in the hall were true. Asher turned calmly. The man explained that it was a warning for the Countess and the Duke. The head of the committee was sure that those two would not be able to do anything in 2 weeks. He said that they would wait until Inessa resigned. Only Enoch and the lady remained in the hall. His lordship walked around the room in thought. The girl could not say a word. The blonde turned to his friend. He assured her that even without the Artists' Association, they would be able to organize an exhibition. The Countess clutched her dress nervously. She understood that the association would boycott the exhibition. The lady did not react to her friend's words. She was thinking in her head how to persuade the artists to participate in the exhibition. The Countess suddenly asked for forgiveness. She explained that she had been given a chance and she had ruined it. Enoch was not at all desperate. He proved to the girl that they would be able to organize the exhibition on their own. The guy said that they would organize such an outstanding event that the ministers would be forgotten altogether. Inessa's eyes shone with hope. The Duke recalled that, in addition to the members of the association, the kingdom was full of other remarkable artists. The lady immediately remembered the people from the street of workshops. The blonde quoted his friend's words about giving the locals a chance to become famous at the exhibition. The Countess remembered her words, but wanted to refute them. Enoch did not let her say a word, only promised that he would take care of external factors. Inessa understood that the Duke cared about her so much, not so that she would give up. The lady declared to herself that she was obliged to do everything in her power. Full-scale preparations for the exhibition had begun in earnest. The Countess was thinking over the entire plan. The most important thing was to provide sufficient compensation to the residents of the street. Although the street would be rented for the festival, it should not cause inconvenience to the lives of locals. The girl wanted to make it so that in the future they could rent that place again. That is, It was necessary to provide comfort to the locals so that they would want to cooperate in the future. 3 administrators listened attentively to her orders. Their task was to conduct a survey among residents about the exhibition. The girl in glasses approached the lady. She brought a list of artists who wanted to participate in the festival. A crowd of people gathered near the entrance to show off their talents and be seen by the whole world. Inessa came out to them. She was shocked by the fact that she would be the only one approving the candidates. The lady was looking through the exhibition documents. She was pleased that everything was going better than expected. The Duke approached her. He glanced at the document and noticed that there were unused funds that could be returned to the Queen. Inessa was glad to see her friend. She reported that everything was going well thanks to Enoch. The girl noted that there were many difficulties due to inexperience, but she also stated that without the support of his lordship, she would have given up long ago. The Duke was embarrassed by such words. He asked again whether her compliments were true. Inessa wanted to make the guy blush. She continued to praise his talents. The lady said that he didn't know how to accept compliments at all. The blonde clarified that it depended on who was giving the compliment. The Countess couldn't help but laugh. His lordship looked at her in bewilderment. He thought that Inessa was laughing at him. She explained that she wasn't laughing at her friend himself. She said that she had only just discovered how sweet he could be. Enoch himself laughed a little. He said that he would forgive his girlfriend for the first time, of course. It was all a joke. The work continued to boil in the hall. The Countess understood that it was only thanks to his lordship that they had managed to carry out everything they had planned. Inessa looked at the sky through the window. She asked the heavens for the exhibition to be a success. In the kingdom of Coldroth, preparations were underway before they were sent to Lancaster. They were fully prepared, but there was a rather large problem. Several sailors were searching for something in the bushes. Mrs. Creha was watching their actions. The woman loudly asked what the servants were doing. One of them reported that the ship was ready, but the servants noticed that they had a problem. His Majesty was nowhere to be found. The girl in armor began to look for him all over the street. She said that now was not the time to play such hide-and-seek. The prince sat on the roof of a house not far from the ship. He reasoned that he did not want to go anywhere. In his opinion, that exhibition would be a complete bore. The next day, the report was delivered to the Queen herself. Her Majesty admired the perfection of the report. The Duke and Inessa were pleased with such praise. Elena praised them for the excellent work they had done. Enoch asked hesitantly what they had decided to do with the Artists' Association. The monarch noted that she did not expect this from the ministers. She said that their boycott had completely failed. The woman also said that she had no intention of taking the side of those infantile artists. The Queen changed the subject. Her Majesty asked if they had found partners for the banquet. The two friends didn't know what to answer. They just looked at each other. They were waiting for an explanation. Elena began to explain. The exhibition was a 3-day event. It all ended with a banquet, which was held in the royal palace. Inessa replied that she was only busy preparing the event. The Duke responded in the same way. The Queen suggested that in that case, they should go to the final banquet together, as partners. Her Majesty explained her proposal by the fact that they were both the organizers of the exhibition. Accordingly, it was easier that way. They couldn't give a clear answer right away. In order to discuss everything in private, they left the office for a while. The Countess looked down and thought. The girl was thinking about what she should do. The Duke was completely confused. He was shocked by such a proposal. His eyes darted from worry. Enoch spoke first. He noted that it was impossible to refuse the Queen's offer. But he also specified that if the girl was not satisfied with it, she could calmly refuse. Inessa raised her head to her friend. She replied that everything was fine and was ready to go with his lordship. The lady specified that something was necessary for the success of the exhibition. She also agreed that the Queen's offer should not be refused. The Duke concluded that she had accepted the proposal only for the sake of the exhibition's success. In order not to show her real feelings, the lady agreed with his conclusion. Enoch said he was glad to go with the Countess. The girl suggested that they return to the office and finish preparing the exhibition. The blonde immediately went back. Inessa hesitated for a moment. Her heart was tormented by doubts. The ship of the neighboring state arrived at the port. Many people had already gathered on land. The first to formally greet them was the King of Lancaster. Mrs. Cretch thanked His Majesty for the invitation. Edward noted that there were rumors that this time the prince himself would be in the delegation. The lady was stupefied. His Excellency said that none of the visitors resembled the prince. He concluded that these were just rumors. The girl remembered to herself how their prince jumped out of the ship. She decided not to tell the head of Lancaster anything. The Countess walked along the street. She inspected the final touches. She also asked people to correct something sometimes. There was a crowd of people gathered near one of the counters. Inessa noticed this and decided to come up to sort it out. A stranger asked about the goods. He took a bag of paint, which, in theory, dried in the light. The guy smeared paint on the canvas. It dried instantly. The seller was shocked and said that he returned the paint to the warehouse because he thought it didn't work. The stranger continued to criticize all the goods. He forced the man to exchange everything for goods from Caldroff. Lady Briarton turned to the boy. She assumed he was a part of Caldroff's delegation. Inessa said that it was a pleasure to meet him. She was surprised that the delegation had already begun to inspect the festival site. The prince was shocked by her words. He thought that the exhibition would be held in the royal palace. The Countess explained that this time they decided to radically change the organization of the exhibition. Inessa reasoned that, judging by the guy's words, he was well-versed in art. She expressed her hopes that he would like the event. The lady asked him what he was not happy with. The prince replied that the atmosphere of the exhibition was not like the previous times. The Countess understood that the stranger was not a connoisseur of modest art, but she hoped that they would like the elegance of such. The lady opened her mouth in shock. Perhaps she began to understand that the prince himself stood before her. The delegation arrived at the palace. Inside, they were officially met by the Duke and Her Highness. Mrs. Kretsch thanked them again for the invitation. The Queen was pleased that they were the ones organizing the exhibition. The monarch noted that the exhibition would be radically different from previous ones. She understood that the guests had special expectations. The tall girl said that they were looking forward to the beginning of everything. Elena suggested going to the guest apartment. Enoch didn't take much part in the conversation. He looked into the distance. The boy was waiting for the Countess to arrive. At that time, Inessa was arguing with a stranger. She was shocked by his impudence. The girl accused him of rudeness. The boy declared that their art was boring. Her ladyship awaited an explanation of his words. The prince compared modern paintings with those of Lancaster. According to him, the style of the kingdom was outdated, like a relic of the past. The Countess explained that their style was attractive because of its elegance. It was called classic. The boy continued to compare. He said that in painting, brightness of colors was necessary. Selden thought Caldroff's art was far superior. There was silence, and they exchanged angry glances. Inessa decided to act smarter. She suggested not to argue, but to see everything at the exhibition tomorrow. The stranger agreed to end the argument. He noted that he had no time to look at the sights. Her ladyship looked at the guy in surprise. She asked where the stranger had come if not to the exhibition. The prince considered her question. The lady did not wait for his answer, but said that she had not yet finished her inspection of the festival. The girl apologized to the stranger. She quickly ran off in an unknown direction. Selden was left alone. He just laughed at the locals. The guy thought that everyone in Lancaster had problems with their heads. The prince recalled the day he was told about the trip. He tried to understand why he had to go. His father, King Demos, explained that the boy had lived too comfortably. He said that his son had a task. My father explained that after Edward's coronation, the foundation of Lancaster was shaken. He specified that many wanted to see Enoch as king. The king noted that the younger brother had no claims to the throne. Edward needed to strengthen his power because those who did not like him could start a rebellion. The Majesty of Caldroff asked his son to go and find out everything about the king. He was interested in whether Edward controlled his country well. Sheldon began to understand his father's request. Their king feared that a Lancastrian split could lead to another 100 Years' War. Their Majesty repeated that his son's mission was to make a good survey of Lancaster. He noted that Sheldon was the most selfish of his children, but at the same time, he was still considered a member of the royal family. The prince agreed to carry out the order. He did not continue the conversation with his father and went to the exit. The servants opened the door for the boy. The king asked if his son was still interested in painting. Sheldon answered briefly that he had not been carried away. The king remarked that he should not be distracted from his duties by all sorts of things. The prince threw off his cloak. His plan was to begin by examining the king. Inessa ran to the delegation. The duke immediately approached her. He was very worried about her. The girl explained that she was inspecting the street. Enoch was glad there was no problem. He reported that the guests had already arrived and were being accommodated in their apartments. Inessa remembered that stranger. She concluded that he was, after all, from the delegation. The lady appealed to his lordship. She said that the exhibition had to be made terribly interesting. In the evening, when everyone was in their homes, the prince returned to the delegation as if nothing had happened. The king and his wife were resting in their room. They were discussing plans for tomorrow. The countess sat on her bed. She couldn't wait for the long-awaited exhibition to begin. The official opening of the exhibition began. The king gave a ceremonial greeting to the delegation. All the people crowded downstairs. On the tables, in addition to food, there were glasses. Everyone was slowly taking them apart for a toast. The prince was bored by all this. This made him yawn, which Krek noticed. Although the girl made a remark, he did not really react to it. The guy made me not call him Highness. He didn't want everyone to know who he was before time. Sheldon asked what this girl had managed to find out. She said that because of the ceremony, the opinion of the aristocracy was greatly divided. Krek also noted that some ministers had left the festival's management group. The prince did not understand this. She explained that the queen had appointed someone undesirable, and that was why there was disagreement. Sheldon was surprised by the disobedience of their ministers. He concluded that the aristocracy was not afraid of either the queen or the king. Edward proposed to raise glasses. He loudly declared that the ceremony had begun. Everyone in the hall raised their glasses. Their toast was to peace between states. The carriage with Inessa and the prince was heading to the exhibition. The countess immediately recognized the young man. He also recognized her and called her crazy. The lady did not stir up a quarrel. She introduced herself as the person in charge of the management group. Sheldon understood why the countess had been so protective of Lancaster's art the day before. He apologized for yesterday. Inessa noted that yesterday, it seemed to her that the guy understood art. She expressed her hopes that they would like the exhibition. Her ladyship asked the stranger's name. He said to call him simply Sheldon. The lady smiled happily. The green-eyed girl, in order to remember, repeated his name out loud. All the carriages were moving at the same pace. They were approaching the bridge where the palace grounds ended. The countess told the guests that behind that bridge, there was a view of the main street. It was on that street that the festival was held. Their carriage drove into the street. The bright sun blinded the prince. He had to cover his face with his hand. A crowd of people was already walking around the exhibition. Music was playing everywhere. All the creators were ready to show their talents. Some of the sellers put their most successful goods up for sale. Each of them wanted to make money from the exhibition, which was logical. The overseas guests were surprised by the scale of the festival. One man from the delegation said he had never thought of such places in Lancaster. The carriages stopped at the main entrance. Inessa noted that it was too early to be surprised by the scale. She said that there were works of art all over the street, and a guide was provided for the entire delegation. The carriages stopped in a row for everyone to get off. The countess waited until everyone was ready to walk around the exhibition. Some didn't wait for the guide, but went on their own. They loudly discussed how cool this exhibition was compared to the last one. Her ladyship listened to their conversations with joy. She was glad that she had pleased the people of Caldroff. The prince was one of the last to come out. He looked with interest at the first views of the festival. Sheldon saw that Inessa was near him. He hid his real emotions, and he noted that the exhibition was not bad. The guest could not contain his emotions. He loudly declared that the festival was excellent. This somewhat embarrassed the lady. The prince wanted this countess to show him around the exhibition. She tried to justify herself by saying that she was the organizer and couldn't do it, but the guy didn't care much. The duke was talking to other people from Caldroff. His attention was drawn to how Inessa was walking with Sheldon. His lordship fell silent, watching them, his face filled with bewilderment, and perhaps a little jealousy. The prince continued to insistently force the countess to give him a tour. The girl was surprised by his arrogance. The countess did not dare to bring up his status, but she understood that, judging by his impudence, He was an unusual nobleman. Sheldon continued to insist. He stated that it was a great thing for their country. The girl decided to agree to it. Enoch approached them and asked if he could go with them on a walk around the festival. The Duke greeted the guests. He introduced himself as Manager Enoch. He also said that a tour had been prepared for the other representatives. Krek thought that he was the king. She quietly told the prince. The guy carefully looked at the man who came to them. Inessa communicated with His Excellency. The lady reminded Sheldon that he had to find the people who had distanced themselves from the king. Sheldon approached the organizers. He agreed to their offer to go on a walk together. Inessa walked with Kreka. She was glad that everything was finally getting better, and she could breathe a sigh of relief. The only thing she didn't like was the gloom behind them. The two guys were walking together, suspiciously silent. Krek and the Countess approached several paintings. The lady explained to her guest the essence of those landscapes. The Duke watched her ladyship, a slight, calm smile on his face. Sheldon reached Enoch. He said the exhibition was good. The blonde didn't really believe his words, but the guy insisted that he was being honest. The prince said he had heard that there had been strong disagreements during the preparation of the exhibition. He was surprised that despite the careful selection of the managers, there had been a boycott. His lordship merely smiled calmly. He noted that there were no such difficulties as the boy had imagined. He stated that everything went smoothly, only thanks to the Countess's abilities. Sheldon remembered everything in his head. With their small company, they approached the main square. Inessa said that the square was planned so that artists could paint right on the spot. The lady's attention was drawn to the finished paintings on the wall. She was struck by the beauty of these works. The Duke approached his girlfriend from behind. He leaned over so that only she could hear him. The guy suggested that she draw on the wall herself. Inessa wanted to justify herself by saying that she was just a simple staff. Enoch laughed slightly at these remarks. He said it would be the great loss for the state if the best artist did not showcase his talent at the festival. The blonde man urged her to do it. He asked as a member of the royal family, and also as a sponsor of the county. The lady came up to the wall. The whole wall was already painted. The girl was looking for a place where she could paint her picture. Nearby, two men deliberately spilled paint on the wall. They laughed about it and simply went to another place to paint. The Countess had an idea. She started drawing. Many people began to watch her work. Sheldon watched her work. His lordship approached him. The blonde noted that people who had not encountered such things might not understand the true meaning. Enoch thought about his words. He remembered himself as a child. Then, too, people could not understand the true meaning of his actions. The Duke said that when he met the Countess, Nikikaias, he understood a lot about himself. What was important was what he felt inside, not what was said around him. Inessa's work slowly began to take shape. From an ordinary blot, the girl made a waterfall. People praised her work among themselves. Sheldon continued to watch, while thinking about the Duke's words. While all the people were on the square itself, Ryan was hiding behind one of the walls. He was spying on his ex-wife's work. His appearance was not the best.